Madam Town Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Michael Del Santo.
Present.
Valerie DiPaolo. William Dietzick.
Here.
James Morelli.
Here.
Toni Morrison.
Here.
Christopher Palmieri.
Here.
Jack Perry.
Here.
Jennifer Klock.
Here.
Paul Chaplinsky.
I'm here, thank you, and I did hear from Councilwoman DiPaolo. She is going to be out of the area today, so she won't be here. Can we please all stand for the prayer? And following the prayer, I would like to ask our scouts to start us off with the flag salute.
Heavenly Father, give us the ability this night to see past what is first apparent and into the very heart of issues that are presented. Keep us open and willing to hear the concerns of the people of the community, and give us the courage to act upon those things which are best for Southington. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If everybody can please remain standing. I'd like to have a moment of silence for Jerry Dandro, who was a longtime resident in town, did a lot of volunteer work in town, recently passed away. Jerry's wife, Ann, passed some years ago before him and was our first councilwoman who was the chairperson of the Southington Town Council from 1981 to 1983. So between Jerry and his wife, there's been a lot of service given here in town and at the state level. His wife was a state representative, and they both were actively involved in so much in our community across the state. Jerry will certainly be missed, also a member of St. Dominic's Church for those who go there. So if we can please have a moment of silence for Jerry. Thank you. Okay, we are looking for a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the July 8th council meeting.
Thank you, Councilman
Second.
Palmieri and Councilman Del Santo. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, the motion passes 8-0. We are now going to have a presentation from the South Central Health District on the ReWorld application that's before the Bristol incinerator. There's been a lot of dialogue in the community about a lot of things going on with the facility. There's some previous complaints on noise, which I think are still being discussed and looked at. There is currently an application for the scouts. I learned that we have two scout troops here. We have scout troop from Troop 45 and then also from 145. So we wanted to first thank the scouts for coming out and attending this government meeting. Hopefully you all walk away with some knowledge on one of these topics, and hopefully you can earn a badge or one of the things that you're working towards. If there's any follow-up questions for the council members from any of the scouts, please make sure you reach out to us, any one of us at any time. We'd be happy to talk to you more about the stuff that happened tonight or previous or future meetings. There is going to be a time for public communications later in the meeting for anybody who would like to speak at the podium. So if there's any of the scouts who would also, as you go on through the evening, if something intrigues you and you want to just make a statement or tell us anything, we'll have an opportunity for the public to speak later under public communications, okay? So moving on again to item 3, we have with us Susan Lonzak, who's our health director. Susan's going to start us off by telling us a little bit about some of the work that she's done over the last, well, not very long, because I think everybody kind of was informed of this application on rather short notice. We are thankful to DEP for having a second follow-up public hearing scheduled, which we're going to hear about. And this kind of started, when we heard about the incinerator in Bristol filing with DEP to have hazardous waste, biohazardous waste, and specifically infectious waste incinerated at the plant. Naturally, you can, those of you who are attending, you can imagine that there was some concerns about what safety measures were in place, what the effects would be to the workers, to the communities, to the resources around the incinerator. And, we think that there's still a lot of open questions. There's still some more work to do. So our objective for tonight is to have the health director start us off with a little bit of a background and understanding of what she's been able to come up with, give us a little bit of some guidance as to the things that we should consider as a council as we engage with the community and more specifically with DEEP on this application. And then we have two experts also in the field that will follow Susan. So if you don't mind, please, Susan, start us off.
Sure. Thank you for having me this evening. So yes, it was a little bit of a short notice that the health district was made aware of this permit application. The permit application is for Reworld, which is formerly Covanta. The health district is familiar with Covanta for complaints of noise nuisances within the last year that have come through. And so we have been working with neighboring health districts and the company to try to rectify the issues that have presented themselves. But in the meantime, this application was presented to us, and concerns from council, from residents, individuals were brought to light with a really short period of time. So the application that was done through DEP was an application to essentially modify their existing permit. And the existing permit allows them to be a waste removal facility. And this modification would be to allow them to incinerate biomedical waste. And initially, when it was presented to me, there was plenty of questions that were, left open, and really it didn't have enough information. The public comment session was a 30-day period, but we were essentially made aware of it at the health district about a week and a half, 2 weeks prior to the date. So I quickly was able to get with my colleagues at Bristol Burlington Health District as well as Farmington Valley Health District, and we all essentially had the same concerns. We wanted to ensure that specific things were being looked at to ensure that this wouldn't impact public health, and that we had as much information as possible. So that I did end up putting something together for the council at the very end of July, and the public comment window ended on August 5th. Information that we gathered as a collective 3 health districts came from working directly with DEEP and asking pointed questions and trying to get as much information as possible. At a local level, obviously, we don't have the regulatory authority to say, no, this can't be here, yes, this can be, but we definitely have the ability to ask additional questions and also bring to light some of the concerns that we had that were with the noise complaints that were still ongoing and that were impacting our residents. So the main issues in a very short period of time that we were presenting and looking for some clarification on were chemical emission exposures. We were also looking to understand if DEP had looked into whether or not this new application would increase issues with noise based on what was going to be put through on a daily basis. We also had heard from residents and different individuals in the communities requesting more information about the process for transportation of this biomedical waste that has infectious diseases, that the transportation process from point A to incineration. And so those things were questioned. The general consensus is that DEP does have set standards for emissions. They have standards specifically, addressing emissions, and have standards for how they evaluate it. But I think that there was a general outcry from the public for just some general, more guided information so that people could feel comfortable with this coming to our neighboring town. The sound issue, although it is not in Southington, did impact Southington residents. And so this was something we wanted to gain more information. The one good thing that I can tell you that I'm happy about and I can share the specific information on is that public hearing, although it closed on August 5th, it does not mean that that was the last time for public to weigh in on their concerns. I know that the town council put together a very well-written letter in opposition and kind of itemizing specific concerns they had for the residents of Southington, and that was put in prior to the 5th. But the information that I did get today was that specific dates were set for the hearing, and the hearing process opens up another opportunity for public comment. It offers the opportunity to not only do it via Zoom, where people can opt to speak for a short 3-minute period, but also gives an opportunity for additional written comment, which I believe if individuals want to comment tonight, this is a great opportunity to get as much information as possible. So what I am aware of as of today is that on October 9th, the hearing officer that gets assigned to this specific permit application will be doing a site visit so that they have a better understanding of the location. The hearing, there will be a public comment section for the hearing that's scheduled via Zoom at 6:30 p.m. on October 22nd. They will be accepting written public comment through November 1st. So it does extend past that. So if individuals watch and they hear things and they want to add more to it, they can. And then the hearing will initiate and start on the 7th of November. So the bottom line is that although there are concerns or questions that as a community we would want addressed and answered, I do think that there is additional timing, which is good. It's better than what we were feeling initially when we heard about this. And as an update, because I think this is important, and I know that it's been a topic of concern for many residents that we've dealt with, the noise complaints that have been coming through. They're difficult for us to enforce because the facility is in Bristol. It's not here. The other component of it that has been longstanding and difficult is that they aren't complaints of generating loud noise that would be typically in a local ordinance that would be, excessive noise. These complaints are kind of long-standing, low-level frequencies that are impacting community members in our 3 health districts. So Bristol Burlington has been working tirelessly, and we've been collaborating with them, and they will be moving forward with legal action requiring that the company mitigate the issues. And so that is wonderful. It's taken a very long time and a lot of behind-the-scenes work to do evaluation on properties in the surrounding towns with private consultants, and things will be moving forward, which I know was a concern of the council as far as, a permit being approved through DEEP prior to certain nuisances being addressed. So I think that there are things that are moving in the positive direction for that nuisance that is impacting our community. So I just wanted to share that with you. So overall, that's what I will report on. Essentially that the public comment component is still going to be open. I know that we're going to hear some additional information from the 2 experts, which will be helpful as well in gleaning some more information about things. But I'm happy to take questions down the road where your local health district and anybody can reach out. But I think this is a great forum and opportunity for people to offer comment here. So,
Thank you. Questions for the health director from the council? Please.
Just one. On the emissions side, you said DEEP has set standards. Which are the standards they apply here with bio-waste?
So that's a great question that the expert, I'm sure, is going to
Yeah,
talk a little bit more into.
Okay.
So I wanted to give you a general update on some of the timeframes. But emissions in general, they are it's all mapped out, but I'm sure we can explore it a little bit more in the next.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? Questions for the director? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Susan, for coming out and giving us an overview, and I'm sure we'll be speaking with you about this and any future support that we may need. Okay, I now have the pleasure of introducing Ed Chrysiunis. Did I say that right? Yes, you did. Excellent. And if it's okay, I'd like, because many people probably have not met Mr. Chrysiunis, I recently met him, had a couple conference calls with him, and first of all, I want to thank Ed, because Ed's been for the last week in Ethiopia and just landed last night, so not even 24 hours. So he's probably still quite jet lagged. But thank you so much for coming out. I appreciate that. And do you? Is it okay if I read a little bit of the bio, or did you want to maybe do a brief intro
How about if I just
on
give
the
you
high
a quick
points?
one? You've gotten the bio. Please share it with the council members. I'm
I've done
fine
that.
with that. Actually, I would like to say, first of all, hello to my fellow scouts. Eagle Scout, Troop 28, 1978, Waterbury, Connecticut. If you haven't had a chance to go to Philmont yet, I wish you'll go. Or Granite Lake, Matagamon. If you've been there, great. It's nothing like climbing Mount Baldy, 12,441 feet. I still have my bolo. I still have all my merit badges. Everything I did in scouting still helps me today. So kudos, keep up the good work.
Excellent. Thank you, Ed.
Yeah, super. I mean, my God, did I go into a scout meeting? Was it like, okay, here we go.
Excellent.
Yes, okay. Yes, Paul reached out to me. My cell phone went off at 11 o'clock at night, text message. I was like, and I said, okay.
That's not
Oh,
unusual.
I texted you back. Can I call you in the morning? Right? And here I am today. My name is Ed Chrysiunis. I am the president, chief cook, and bottle washer of a company called WN International. Stands for Waste Not, Want Not. I have been in the medical waste industry for 35 years. I started right at the beginning of the Medical Waste Tracking Act. I did work at St. Francis Hospital in the microbiology and infectious disease department, so my background in healthcare really set me up for what I've been doing for the past 35 years. I've worked around the world. I've been in over 60 countries. I'm not going to go through the acronyms of all the various organizations, but if you name them, everyone knows about WHO, everybody knows about the United Agency. Councilman Morrison, I think it is. Did I detect an English accent there a little bit?
You might, yeah.
You might, right, right. Worked with the Environment Agency and the NHS, Scottish EPA. I've seen the good, the bad, the ugly of what I call the boutique waste industry, okay? What I would like to do tonight, because Paul did a nice job in his correspondence. I could talk for hours on this, but my wife said, stay focused. And Paul, your letter is my focus for tonight. Happy to give you all the references I have in my experience. Let me start off with the letter, and then if you want to delve into anything, that's fine. I think you do a good job of covering all the issues. If I were to critique you, I would have gone back and said, we need references behind all these things. I also looked at these from the standpoint of low, medium, and high risks, okay? The question on environmental impact, and I kind of look at this in a combination of emission controls. You actually do have a state-of-the-art incinerator there with emission control. It's not like what I've seen in low or middle-income countries. You have an incinerator that's actually been operating in, correct me if I'm wrong, 1988 is when it started? Right. I want you to keep in mind this as well. What you are concerned about, the infectious waste stream, when we talk about infectious waste, represents, historically, the data says 15% of the waste stream coming out of hospitals. So, if that facility is getting waste from hospitals, it's still getting plastic and gauze and bandages, but it may not have been classified as that particular material. So when we talk about characteristics of emission, it's the physical characteristics that we're very concerned about. So if I'm going to add another 15% of this material to it, it's not really going to change the challenge to the incinerator. The big issue here is the microbiological makeup. And again, I've been in healthcare for 42 years. I was exposed to TB. I've gotten stuck with the needles. The solid waste industry is a dangerous industry. There are many injuries that occur, but if you start looking at issues related to infectious disease transmission, the data is scant. I can't tell you that you're not getting an accident or an exposure. I'm old enough to remember, and some of you I think are old enough to remember, the garbage guy that would come to the backyard, pick up your garbage can, right, fling it over your shoulder, put it into the rear end loader, and it compresses it. Do you realize every time you compress that waste, you are releasing aerosols? But we've not done a good job of capturing, so who's been exposed to bugs and bacteria? And if somebody unfortunately puts chemicals in there, and this happened in the city of New York, fluoric acid was thrown into the back of a rear end loader. A guy that was dumping it actually got exposed to it, burned his lungs, and died. Okay, very rare incident, but most of us that don't work in that industry don't hear about that. What have we done with minimizing aerosol exposure? Think about it. You have a 96-gallon container on the side of the road, an arm takes it, dumps it. Where's the driver? He's in a cab. So we definitely have made things safer. So when we talk about your environmental and emission controls, I'm not as concerned about those. DEP, if there were issues with the emissions, we would have heard about them a long time ago. I haven't looked at those data or records yet. Sir, my colleague here might be presenting and has more knowledge on that. But if that facility was having air emission problems, it'd be closed down. I worked for the first medical waste incinerator in Connecticut, which opened up in 1986. It was at Safeway Disposal in Middletown, Connecticut. Phil Armetta ran it with dainty rubbish. We had 2 incinerators, we had 2 microwave units. The facility eventually got a $1 million fine for not doing proper emission monitoring. When you're burning waste, it is an art. You just don't throw like a piece of wood onto a fire and just say it's going to burn. But my concerns about, again, the emissions is relatively low at this point. I do think we've got public health concerns, which I feel are a medium issue, traffic and infrastructure as well, because I do have the application from 2022. I was aware of these things going on because I'm aware of what Covanta has done in Marion, Oregon, in Lakeland, Florida. I actually just chatted with California Department of Public Health on this particular issue of what's in their application, so I'm going to chat a little bit more. From a public health perspective, in fact, in most cases, infectious waste is more of an occupational risk than a public health risk, unless you're in a low-income country. I mean, I can show you pictures of the world of people digging and doing sifts with needles and syringes. However, people in this industry do get needle sticks. People in MRF facilities get them. Guess what? We have diabetics out there who are discarding needles into milk crates and other things like that. The concern that I have here is that we are going to be dumping a lot of material. I should say Covanta is going to be dumping material, potentially creating aerosols. And I'm not sure that DEEP has actually asked Covanta to do some study related to, in the other plants, what's the composition of the aerosols now that you've introduced infectious waste into the process. There's only one article or one incident in the literature, and this happened at a plant in Washington State, where 14 people in a medical waste treatment plant were exposed to TB. That is, they had positive skin tests. 3 of them developed TB. A rare incident, but nonetheless, these people went home at the end of the day. TB is a respiratory spread disease. You go into the community. Guess what? There is a potential, although again, the data is a little scant on this. So from the public health perspective, it's not something just to blow off. There is some potential risk there. When we talk about traffic and infrastructure, it says that they're not going to increase traffic. And I'm scratching my head here of getting in 57 to 100 tons of waste a day. That's truck traffic. Are they going to reduce the amount of solid waste that they're taking in? So it's a little unclear there. I think a very, very important issue here is emergency response. What happens if infectious waste is in a chute and catches fire and they can't put it out and has gotten in an accident, is in the chute? The reason I say that, I give that example. I went to a Covanta facility about 25 years ago in Niagara, 3,000 tons per day, so a little bigger than this one. And in fact, I have to go back to my notes, which I was looking for, and Paul, I apologize, I couldn't find them, but I was in the plant and it wasn't operational. Why? On the sloping kiln inside, whatever is moving on one of the levels had stopped. So in fact, the unit had become constipated. Waste was piling up at the top and not moving downwards, so it wasn't burning. Waste was in the chute. They used dynamite to blow it out. So that's my recollection. I'm walking around with an engineer. We had hard hats on. I heard fire in the hole. Poof. Wow. And they wanted to crane waste in. Remember, you have in these plants, you have a pit where waste is dumped into. The Covanta plant actually in Niagara does get treated medical waste, just as the Bridgeport plant does. That is craned in, put into the chute, and it goes in. But in some cases, that material may be shredded already. It's certainly treated. You may still have physical hazards. Remember, there's needles there. So what happens if somebody's in the kiln trying to repair something, you've got untreated medical waste, have the firefighters from Southington and surrounding communities actually been to the plant and gone through an exercise of How are we going to rescue folks? We did this in Middletown. We brought in the fire department so they understood, because we had thousands of boxes on the floor before we started actually operating in an automated system. Monitoring and reporting. I have to admit, I've actually looked at the draft permit, and I've been involved in inspecting, doing regular inspections. This was a few years ago, the facility down in Bridgeport, the future healthcare waste plant. It's 70 ton per day, 2 autoclaves. I do an inspection of a transfer station in East Hartford as well. Even Covanta talks about getting these characterization forms from their clients. Now think about it. I don't think Covanta is involved in transporting waste from around the region, that is collecting it from Pennsylvania, from New York, and bringing it here. They're going to have brokers. Those brokers are going to contract somebody else. So the paperwork is, Paul, I'm going to have you transport waste, but Paul reaches out to Susan. I don't know Susan. You got to get her to do waste characterization, but she's got clients. That whole paper trail to me is very weak. Additionally, DEP is wanting these facilities to do an assessment of the waste before it comes in, to look at what percentage of this waste might be recyclable and should have been pulled out. The reality is, you're not going to open any single box. You're not going to open any single bag. You're not going to expose your workers to try to do some estimate. So there's already a flaw in this permit of asking people to do something that would be potentially an occupational hazard. So let me stop there. As I said, I think I could go on, give you a lot of references here. And Paul, I did give you 2 already. One related to workers concerned about dealing with Ebola waste or Category A waste. This was a survey that was done of workers working in Stericycle plants and the concerns that they had about receiving this particular waste stream. There's also an article by the Dean of the School of Texas A&M Public Health, and Sean Gibbs. I had him on a conference call with some state regulators recently saying, we are not ready for the next pandemic, for the waste stream. I think we all experienced and saw the photographs of what happened when we were dealing with COVID waste, and I saw it around the world. So there's some major gaps here. Again, great job on the letter. Definitely need some references and some more muscle behind this, but I think we have some it's not that Covanta shouldn't be doing this, but they haven't proved that they're worthy of getting there. That's how I'm looking at it. They haven't dotted their I's and crossed their T's. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the council members?
Can I just ask a couple questions?
Sure.
I just want to frame up exactly what you're supporting. So who do you work for? Who are you currently employed for?
I'm self-employed.
Okay, so you don't work for Real World or any of its subsidiaries? Or
No, I do not. I have worked for Stericycle. I have worked for Waste Management. I've worked for all the major medical waste management companies in the U.S. I evaluate all sorts of treatment technologies. Mostly when I come in to work with these companies, I'm basically there to evaluate a technology, evaluate their health and safety practices, and give them recommendations. I have been involved in permitting, filling out applications. I was actually on one of the original committees back in 1992 with the state. In fact, Pat Checco, who I think used to be with the Bristol Burlington Health Department, may be retired, but
So where I'm going with this is that you don't have any sort of financial stake whether this permit gets granted or denied.
No.
So you're here just speaking with us as local policymakers to educate us on your opinion of what's going on. So what is your opinion then? Should this permit be granted, or are you saying the permit should not be granted as written?
the permit as written should not be granted. I think there's flaws in there. That's not to say that, again, we take treated medical waste and we bring it to waste energy plants, okay? Otherwise, this material would be transported to a landfill. There's actually, interesting, just recently, some discussion of, is it better to landfill versus is it better to incinerate? And some people have looked at the carbon footprints and different things like that. There's an economic aspect to this. If I have to transport material long distances, it's going to have an environmental as well as costs associated with it. There are certain standards that should be met. And the way I'm looking at these waste-to-energy plants, again, Marion, Washington has been doing it for a long time. It's probably the only waste-to-energy plant that has I'm going to say a track record. I can't say a good track record, but they have a track record that's been doing it. What we've seen apply to other non-burn technologies, and Paul, you make reference to using alternative methods. Again, those get scrutinized from a material handling perspective. And I don't think we've scrutinized, or I should say DEEP hasn't scrutinized the material handling enough yet. I don't look at this really, again, as a major public health issue. It's really an occupational health one, and I'm just not comfortable with some of the things that they put in here. They need to ask a few more questions to make sure that things are getting asked appropriately. Matter of fact, I don't want them to visit Bristol. I want them to go to Oregon. I want them to see this in action. If you went into the facility in Bristol, all you're going to see is well, this is where we're going to put this material, and this is where we're going to put there. They really need to go see it in operation and actually talk with the local regulators, whether it be in Florida or in Oregon or in Huntsville, Alabama. That's what they put into their application.
So is it fair to say that the theory of, I have no science background, but a theory of incinerating this waste, the theory of it is safe, but the application for this permit on its face is not safe?
It's got, I would say weaknesses. Safe is a very difficult
Right,
word
you
to
use the
define.
words, you insert the word, whatever the
Yeah,
word is.
yeah. Listen, normally you have metrics that are associated. I mean, Susan talked about the emission standards, the temperatures that this incinerator is operating at. You are at temperatures that are going to, in fact, in some cases, will destroy dioxins and furans, but you also have a filtration system afterwards. Out of that filtration system, you're still going to get bottom ash or fly ash, I should say. That is hazardous and dangerous. All the components are there. Plus you have 20 years, almost 20 years, actually over 20 years of operation, where you've not seen anything in the community of, I mean, I haven't looked at this from an epidemiological standpoint, but have there been increases of cancers in that region? I've seen that in other parts of the world. You don't have any metrics that are pointing to, we've got a hot spot here and there. But you have something that you're introducing a waste stream that I think you should be concerned for the occupational health of the people in the operation. If your firefighters have to go in there and address something, storage at the facility, these vehicles, trust me, some of these tractor trailers are going to leak. And where's that liquid going to go? Is it going to leak on the plant grounds, or is it going to leak somewhere else? So there are just some things I think that need to be tightened up within the deep permit. And even I would be asking some of the questions of Covanta as well. Again, it's a little too loose at this particular point. I don't know if something new has been submitted since 2022, if they're still going off of that. Now we've ended up, COVID has passed, but clearly not, this application doesn't even talk about dealing with category A waste or highly infectious agents. So again, a couple of gaps in it as far as I'm concerned.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you for answering my questions.
You're welcome.
Chris?
Can I just follow up on
Yep.
Councilman Dietz's question? So Susan pointed out one concern that I really don't think is under your area of expertise, which is the noise concern. So I'm sure for our next speaker, we can talk a little bit more on that. I don't really, unless I'm wrong, I don't feel that's really your area.
I've had to address noise concerns and complaints. I mean, there's a OSHA standard out there, and you would monitor, but for the public, that's a nuisance. No, not my area of expertise. I would defer to Susan on that.
So within your area of expertise, if I heard you correctly, the areas that you're saying we should be most concerned about are the occupational health of the workers and public safety for firefighters, police
Yes.
officers. The traffic and infrastructure, because you cited the amount of tons per day and feel that we have some merit with that. Emergency response, which again goes to the public safety component. The monitoring and reporting, you mentioned their paper trail is weak. And then finally, the local and treated waste. Am I correct? Are those the areas that?
Yes, that's pretty much covered it. I didn't go into the alternative methods, and again, I want to kind of, bide my time here a little bit, not take up, I don't want to be here for 3 hours, but those are the items. The traffic comments that you made, and I appreciate the word, it has merit. We use that at in one of the committees at the Yukon Health Center a lot. Does this have merit? Well said. I don't recall a traffic study of any kind in their application, and I've seen that when I've actually been a expert witness for some other companies during a public hearing for their treatment plants, and one was an example for a facility in Georgia, and that particular county required a traffic study. I don't recall seeing any traffic study being done here. As I pointed out in their application, they said there's no increase in traffic. So not clear to me if you're bringing in or processing 57 tons a day, which is not a small amount. The larger treatment plants in the U.S. are about 100 tons a day. There's over 100 medical waste autoclave plants in the country. Covanta's right. There's a small number of incineration plants. That is where we are in need of something. But I'm not sure that we need a waste energy plant to deal with just infectious waste, because I think if we dug a little deeper, there are some more plants. I mean, there's one north of Boston. You've got one in Bridgeport. You've got another one that's going to be going into Rhode Island. You got Mount Vernon. Stericycle's got three massive units in central New Jersey. So again, their application is 2022. We're into 2024. What has changed in that industry landscape? That might be something else to have updated. That I'm happy to work with you to provide some of that information.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions?
Anybody else have questions? Tony?
Just, yeah, what Councillor Palmieri said, the issues you essentially spoke about. What does, in your opinion, what does a state-of-the-art plant that does this look like as compared to what DEEP is asking for the permit? What's the difference there? Is it in these issues or is it others?
You know what, if I'm understanding your question, if you ask me about what is state-of-the-art in, what are we doing with this particular waste stream? Is that what you want to know?
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
What
and
are we
I
doing
could
in
tell
this
you.
country right now.
Right. In fact, I think everybody's heard about sustainability, right? Circular economy. Plastics recycling is on the front page of everything. Yeah, plastics is floating in the ocean. That has become the hot topic across the globe. I would say from the generator side, so those producing waste in this country, the laboratories are really taking a major role in that and trying to look at their impact because they use a lot of plastics. Certain hospitals, matter of fact, even here in Connecticut, Yale New Haven has been a leader in that for many years. So it's a long chain of activities, looking at procurement, looking at what you're buying, looking if you can in fact recycle something. Today we have single-use devices. I'm assuming all of you have had some sort of surgical, maybe some procedure where the device was in the hand of the dentist or doctor or whatever, and it got thrown into a bin. Well, some of these things are now, and actually for the past 20 years, been recovered, been reprocessed, and used again. So there's a big push to go in that direction, but there's still waste streams that we haven't conquered. What do you do with some of the complex mixtures of plastics in them? So we're early on in that stage. I would tell you, I think the European is definitely farther ahead in this. I'm on a couple of committees there. We're probably a decade farther or behind them in that respect, but lots of research and technology on that. Even the technologies that are being used to treat waste other than incineration have, like autoclaves as an example. What you put in, it's a pressure cooker like you have at home. What you put in is what you get out. It's sticky, waste is stuck together. That's a challenge of pulling that material, unless you start separating it at the point of generation, which is where we're going in a number of locations. So the science is definitely moving along. I could tell you 35 years ago, New York City, Health and Hospitals Corporation did an assessment of trying to recycle stuff. There wasn't any interest in it. Today, totally different. So it's a story to be followed. I can't point to any one thing and say, that's the aha. Everybody's looking for that, but we're not there yet.
Okay.
Anybody else have questions? I had two
Yes.
questions for Ed. So, from what I've read in some of the literature, when it comes to emissions, and, well, first of all, let me just back up. If I understood your comments, you generally you're expressing to us that there might be a higher concern for public safety if a worker were to be exposed and carry that into the community versus the emissions causing the community harm from the infectious disease that was burned.
Correct. The unit, if operating properly, is not going to release any infectious agents. The temperatures that it's operating at are pretty significant. There are, in fact, the EPA has a methodology for testing medical waste incinerators. We actually did this at Safeway. Our unit was basically half a ton an hour, okay? It's not a big unit. It's like a fireplace as compared to the Bristol plants, okay? But there is a way to test the efficacy of the process. The parametric, the metrics now in that unit are not likely to release any infectious agents. I can't say it doesn't. You can't prove zero, but based on the operating parameters, I'm not concerned about the air emissions, the characteristics like the dioxins and furans. If there were issues with chlorine and acid gas, the workers would notice it in the parking lot. The surrounding community would notice it with pitting of their cars. Okay, so unless you've had those, that's what's going to happen. It will start pitting. When you have acid gases coming out of those. So we've not heard about it. Again, I'll defer to my colleague from Bristol to talk about that. So this is more of an occupational issue before it gets into the kiln, and potentially an issue in the kiln if there's an issue with the kiln not operating, and now you've got to send some firefighters in there.
So what happens, is there ever an instance, or has there ever been instances? Is it possible, like when I'm burning logs in my backyard. Sometimes I throw a log on that doesn't burn very well, and the temperature inside my fireplace is not
Sure.
as high as it was. So if that burn is not as hot as it should be for whatever reason it is, somebody's not throwing logs in there fast enough. Is that an issue? Is there a possibility that you could have an issue with the emissions part of that?
Your challenge and issue is very rudimentary, but it's a great example, Paul. And I like to speak with examples. So you could be putting in material that's excessively wet. And again, remember, these cranes grab about 6 tons of waste, 6 tons of waste at a time. Okay, 900 tons a day. Bridgeport is over 2,000 tons a day. So you're putting in a lot of material. Those operators have to be trained to understand what the waste stream is. And even when waste is going into the pit, there's somebody that's marshaling what's going where. You have an idea what's going on. I think it could happen. Again, I'm going to defer to my colleague from Bristol. It's a great analogy because I've seen this on smaller scale incinerators. You really have to know your waste stream of what you're putting in. In fact, for all these non-burn technologies, the issue is the same. I almost brought a cranial hand drill that I recovered from a shredder from our plant in Middletown in 1991. Came from Yale New Haven Hospital. How do I know? Because it's laser etched with that. It had damaged our shredder. It cost us $30,000 to repair the shredder. We couldn't see it. Went into the shredder, clunk. Okay, now we have to steam it for 2 hours before we can go in. And there's all this needles and other material that workers would potentially expose to. So yes, I think that possibility exists if you are not managing your waste streams correctly, if you have a mechanical problem, which is what happened in Niagara Falls.
So you're opening the door to another scenario for me. I mean, what if the company hired an employee who had nefarious, thoughts about hurting a large number of people? Is it possible that they could do something with this type of system? Could they possibly put something in there that was?
I'll give you an
problem?
example of something that happened in the state of Maine. Again, on a small scale, but you've posed an interesting scenario. So the Maine Hospital Association built its own medical waste treatment facility, and they were using two types, they're using a technology called a hydroclave. And a hydroclave is a pressure vessel, so it's an autoclave, it's a round cylinder, but going through the middle of the cylinder was a shaft with paddles on it. It actually comes from the rendering industry. You would actually put animals into this type of chamber, you'd create offal, you just bang the heck out of the material, and now you have this massive mush. Somebody came up with the idea, it came from Canada, hydroclave again, and you put medical waste into it, waste comes out of it, it's torn apart, and then it went through a shredder. Some of the people this wasn't a nefarious action, this was more of a case of somebody not paying attention. So imagine a 16-gallon, almost a little bit smaller than the Slim Jim that's over there on the side of the wall, the black one, filled with pager batteries. Remember the days of pagers? Mm-hmm. Okay? And all those went into the unit. Some of them had lithium batteries. Went through the autoclave, they came out, went into the shredder, they had a fire in the compactor because of the lithium batteries. As I said, this is a waste stream that you cannot see what's inside of it. The only thing you might be able to detect is radioactivity, because they will have a radiation detection system. But even then, are you going to go digging through the waste? Normally, radioactive materials, that bag, bin, trailer is parked off to the side for a few days. You go back until you get the background, and then you process it.
We can do real-time monitoring of hydrocarbons, right, coming
Yep.
out of the stack. That's pretty easy. So if you really wanted to see real-time what the hydrocarbon level was coming out off the top of the stack, I think maybe they even have the capability. But infectious disease, is that even
Yeah, you
a
wouldn't,
thought?
most people would not be looking at infectious diseases, although, again, you have not infectious agents, but you have microorganisms that can withstand very high temperatures. Bacterial spores, okay? Some of these spores have been found in the air emissions. They're not pathogenic. They normally exist in the environment. So there are ways of putting organisms into an incinerator, and you could look and capture their aerosols. For me, what I would be interested in doing is, if they were going to start processing waste, as a matter of fact, what I would do is, and I've done this in England, and I've done it a couple other places, we take a known organism that's not pathogenic, we put it into the waste stream, put it into a bag, and some liquid or whatever, we have it go through a process, so it gets dumped. And then we have what we call settling plates and air samplers around the building, and we look at the distribution of those bacteria. And if you find these bacteria everywhere, guess what? Your system is releasing the bacteria. okay? That just shows you that you have dispersion. I suspect, and I don't know what the air exchanges are in these waste energy plants. I mean, I've been to several of them in the US and outside the US, but you do go into some facilities and going through the opening to the dumping floor, and there feels like there's a little bit of a negative pressure, or there's a mist of water to keep down dust from going out into the compound. So related to, again, in the case of occupational exposure to the medical waste workers, you're dumping material over and over again. And you might be dumping things like culture plates. This country and many laboratories did away with autoclaving their culture plates. What I like to say, this is where I worked back in the 80s. I grew things on purpose in large quantities. I could see the enemy. If I put 100 tubes of blood in front of you, you couldn't tell me which one is infectious or not. But if I put a culture plate of E. coli or Staph aureus, Ed, we got some bugs here. So now you have these containers of this material getting dumped. They're not autoclaved, they haven't been treated. They could have TB on them. And that's what happened to the facility in Morton, Washington. That was a medical waste treatment facility that was grinding and shredding. And in fact, combination of two things. Equipment wasn't working, staff were not doing or following SOPs. So kind of both guilty on both sides.
Okay. Thank you, Ed.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for coming out. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
This is my passion, if you haven't figured that out. So I am definitely willing to help you to look at this with some science and objectively. So thank you.
I'll text you tomorrow around 1 a.m. Thanks. Scouts, how's everybody doing? Is this a good topic or what? You're gonna have a lot to talk about.
There's going to be a test.
And I will second his recommendation if you ever get the chance to do Philmont. My oldest son went, and he came back a different person. It's an absolute life experience for a young scout. Pay attention to the bag, the box and the book. If they get one to you and you see a little BB on the item that you're supposed to collect and put in your camping bag, that's a designation that says bear bag, which means every night when you go to sleep, you make sure that's in a bear bag and it's hoisted up in a tree somewhere away from where you're sleeping. Pay attention to that part.
Thank you.
One of my son's scout group didn't quite do that.
They missed the BB.
They missed the BB,
Excellent.
the bear bag items.
If you could just introduce yourself and tell everybody for the record.
Yep, I'm Ken Valera. I've been in the waste industry since 1982. Mostly all of that time as a hauler for some of our larger privately owned hauling companies here in Connecticut. I am presently the executive director for Bristol Resource Recovery Authority, which is an operating committee that is put together by the 14 towns here in the region that started just before the Bristol plant was built. They joined together and they marshaled together all of their waste needs and then became the biggest user and operator for the Bristol plant. Once the bonds were paid off, the plant was sold, and that's when Covanta and the private sector ownership started to take over. I do not work for Covanta. I work for the 14 towns. And it's not the Bristol Resource Recovery Committee's issue as to what they're looking for business or any control over what they're going to try and burn. This is a private operator that is applying to the state, which is the regulatory authority, to modify their permit. I've read through the most recent application. It's not an expansion of their permit tonnage. So whatever they're suggesting they bring through for I believe it's 57 ton a day is what they're looking for a permit to do, will be part of their normal tonnage coming through. So there'll be no increase in volume going there. Some of the materials that they're looking to have included in this new permit is material that is already presently accepted, but under separate paper flow and permit characterizations. So they're burning some of this tonnage already, but it's not infectious. It's not, these are things that are contaminated that are acceptable with their present permit through the state standards. The facility that we're talking about, the Bristol plant, in the last few years did a several $million upgrade to their emission system and their bag house, which collects any of the solids or any, it filters the exhaust emissions that come out of the plant. I don't have the present day data on what their standards are, but those are readily available through DEEP. And I know they go through regular inspections on all of the different plants that I've utilized over the years. As far as what the packaging that it appears in their permit application, they're proposing a small outbuilding that's going to be receiving this material. And from the looks of it, they're going to convey that material up into the intake for the boilers. So it will not be tipped on the floor where all of the regular trash haulers that are coming in with the everyday trash. So it won't be mixed with them at all. It appears that they're trying to set it up so that there is limited exposure, which would be a big concern. The actual controls of this through their public hearing section, I do agree that there should be more questions asked of, are they going to be taking Class A types of contaminated materials? From the looks of it, they're not taking any full pathological, they're not going to be taking any body parts, they're not going to be taking any limbs that have been amputated, they're not going to be doing any of that type of work there. This is strictly for the gowns, the fluid-soaked issues coming from an operating room, things of that nature are the type of material I believe they're looking to process. Those are the questions that need to be asked still at this point to clarify exactly what they're looking to put in. The normal delivery methods on those are much smaller vehicles than the regular trash trucks that go in and out. They don't move medical waste in the walking floor trailers that are going in there with the 22 ton of material on them, and the floors leak liquids through them as they're coming down the roads. Medical waste doesn't get transported that way. It's generally in sealed cardboard boxes inside have plastic lined bags. The materials all go in, they get taped shut, they get labeled, they come in and they get offloaded onto a loading dock type floor, and then would get conveyed into a facility. Those are the things that I was concerned when I was looking at the permit. I think for Bristol Resource Recovery's approach on this, that plant serves our 13 towns, and we've got a contract with them for the next 10 years. That you've got a very lucrative deal by comparison to today's pricing. Connecticut's somewhat in a trash crisis situation right now with the closure of the Hartford burn plant, which was close to 3,000 ton a day. Space in legitimate disposal arrangements here in Connecticut is getting tighter and tighter. We've definitely got some concerns on where to be. My concern as the executive director for your agency is year 11. Where do we go and what do we do? So seeing Bristol trying to invest in their plant, trying to improve their plant, I think is a good sign for the 13 towns. It's questionable how this permit has been worded so far, and a few more questions could certainly be asked. What they're looking to do there is not uncommon in the trash plants that we have around. We mentioned Bridgeport before. They take in a lot of this type of material from some unique sources. All of the ports of call in Connecticut, anything that comes in off of a ship from another country has to be put in sealed containers, gets classified as this same group of regulated waste that's got to go through tests and procedures to see what it is before it can even be moved off the piers. And then it gets a special permit and it gets delivered to one of the incinerator plants. Bridgeport happens to be one of them. We've also delivered material to the Hartford plant when it was open. I know there's material that goes in like that into Bristol from different facilities around. And some of it is just manufacturing facilities that have materials that come out. So looking closer at exactly what they're looking to get for materials in, and talking to them about the way they're going to handle it, and how they're going to configure the conveyor, if that's the way they're going to move it into the building, would be great questions to ask and get answered. We don't have, as Bristol Resource, we really don't have an opinion as to whether this is good or bad or should or shouldn't. That's going to be up to DEEP and the political structures of our towns.
Okay. Questions for Kevin? Chris?
You mentioned, a couple questions. You mentioned that you don't see how this could be an increase in volume, and then you elaborated by saying some of the material is currently being disposed of already. First of all, I don't want to speak for the whole council. I know several of us were not aware that some of this material that is proposed now has already been being disposed of at this site.
There are certain materials that DEEP does allow to go in under their regular permit structure with special tracking, special paperwork. It's all regulated, and the state is fully aware of what goes through.
Okay, so.
As a hauler, I know we used to have materials. I did the ports for the shoreline, Bridgeport and New Haven. And for Homeland Security, they had inspectors that came right out, looked at the containers you were using. They had to have gaskets on them. You couldn't let flies in or out of the loads once they were there, because they hoist these things right up onto a ship when it comes into a port of call. And any of the waste that they're concerned with off of that ship that they want to leave here in the United States has to get classified. So they take a sample and they send it right out. Homeland Security supervises that on a regular basis.
And I'm not saying whether that's right or wrong. I'm just stating the fact that, again, I'll speak for myself and not necessarily everyone, but I wasn't aware. Now that I'm aware of what's being proposed, now hence the concern. So it's not like it's an unfounded new concern because it was already happening. We just didn't know that some of the material was being disposed of there. Now that we are aware, we're trying to bring that to the attention.
Absolutely. Yep.
You know, but then can you elaborate more on how could there not be an increase in volume? Yes, some of it, what we just talked about, is included, but there is some new medical waste that is not currently being disposed of there. So how could there not be an increase in the volume?
They have a permit for X amount of tons per day to burn at that burn plant. They've got to stay within that capacity. So if they're full, if they're doing 650 ton a day and that's their limit, and they want to take in 57 ton a day of
Yep.
all medical waste now, they've got to back out of that 650, that 57 ton. They're not going to go over the permitted tonnage.
So then it's a different issue. So they're not going to exceed the permitted amount. But that doesn't mean that there's not going to be an increase in volume. So those are two separate concerns, really.
What I think Councilman Palmieri is saying is we don't know what they're currently operating at efficiency-wise. If they're only at 80% capacity today
Right.
of their 650 that they're
Yes.
allowed, and they add in another 57, then they are increasing their current capacity.
Yes.
They're
Even
just
though they're
not,
still
it's
in
like
the
it's a
limit.
trick word, it's a
Right.
trick wording that they've used in the
It is
application.
in
I think.
actual versus what's permitted. I understand
Right.
what you're saying.
Right.
You know, but if they're full and they're taking in their 650 now, then they can't go over that. They're going to go back and back it back out.
Right. I like the way you explained it. So they may be at 80% capacity now, so fine, they still got that 20% growth. But that's still an increase in the current capacity.
If that's the scenario, yes.
Right, so that's what I'm
Yes.
saying. So those are really two separate concerns now, just so we understand that. You also mentioned it appears that they're separating the waste materials, to try to mitigate a little bit more of the concerns that we heard. You said it appears. How do we know, what type of guarantee do we have that they are, in fact, taking those precautionary measures now?
The permit application that is visible now online, you can see that they've got a proposal for an outbuilding. They're going to construct a new building. They've got a site map where they're proposing to put it, and then putting in conveyor to move the material. I believe some of that might be subject to change with the permit approval, but we're not involved in that by any stretch. I mean, we learned of it kind of late as well. So, we took a quick look at it. I have not gone through a complete deep dive on it.
Okay.
But those were things that we did notice, that it looks like and appears that they're looking to separate that material coming in completely from the normal waste stream. And I believe it would probably be to address his concerns of cross-contamination of employees and other vendors that are bringing material in.
Right. And then finally, I know you mentioned, you know, political factors to determine whether or not this gets approved through DEEP. So your perspective as the executive director, you're saying that there are still some concerns, I guess, from your end, but not enough to necessarily oppose what is being proposed for the site? I'm trying to understand your...
I would say for the industry in general, and in this case, this plant, there is a need for that type of material to be handled here in state. I know we had some very significant issues when COVID hit, and all of the protective clothing that all of the medical facilities were using, whether it be, a convalescent home, a rehab facility, the hospitals themselves, the amount of material that they were going through and needed to be hauled away as trash. When it first started, it was all just being loaded up and stacked into trailers at hospitals and medical facilities around because they didn't know if they could throw it away or not. They did get the approval to be able to put it through our state's incinerator plants. I know they did watch very closely, DEEP did. I did not share in any of those reports or anything, but that material was allowed to be metered into the incinerator plants and put through. And I know they watched it and they monitored it. We never saw any alerts or saw anything turned around. So environmentally, they met DEEP's requirements and the state was satisfied with what the emissions were coming out of those plants.
Okay.
So there was a lot of that type of material that, and it still gets generated to a much smaller scale today. But all of those face masks and everything that you see laying on the sides of the road now or wherever, because people are just dropping them, but all of those materials were just an abundance of considered contaminated materials during the first COVID
Right.
parts.
I'll try to frame it a little differently. So you're just trying to advise us. You're not really stating whether you're in favor or opposed
Yeah,
to this.
the resource committee here isn't gonna.
Taking a stand.
Yeah, we're not taking a stand on that by any
I
stretch.
appreciate that.
The Bristol facility, I can tell you from my years of experience, has always been a very well-run and very efficient operation. The biggest problems that we've had there at that plant over the years has been delays in the lines.
Okay.
And that was more because they were loaded up with a lot of other material from Waterbury and such for a period of time, and that drove the local haulers, anybody that used it. I know you had the same concerns. They were immense, and but they did solve that. That material is no longer coming there, and they're back to reasonable customer service now at the scale.
Okay.
And one of the other things that was mentioned before, anything that's radioactive, it's coming from a medical facility at all of the incinerator plants that DEEP has permitted here in Connecticut, and even the recycle facilities, all of those are required to have radiation detectors on their inbound scales coming in.
Okay.
So anything that would be picked up. I've had things as simple as a Boy Scout compass from the 1950s set off a detector and stop a full 20-ton load from going into a plant. They're very sensitive. They pick up on all of that. So radiation at all of our plants should not be an issue.
I apologize. I forgot one more question, if you don't mind.
Please.
To go back to our health director's point, Susan, thank you, from earlier. There are still ongoing, aside from this application, there's still ongoing concerns about the noise complaints there. In fact, so much so that it's been escalated to a lawsuit now. So what, from your perspective, what is being done to, first of all, address that concern? Because now adding more usage at the facility is probably going to exacerbate that concern even greater.
I started in June working with the Bristol Resource Recovery, so I walked into that situation after it started and looking into everything that I could for the noise issue. There was an issue that was going on. They had some out of balance electrical motors that were in there that were causing a problem. I know they changed both of those motors and got them matched up exactly, same size, same frame, same rotation. And that cleared up some of the issue. They still had another issue, and I know that they did a change in the, sounds like it's a baffle that they put in at the top of the smokestack on it to help break up that low-level frequency. They did that during the shutdown that they had, and it's my understanding they're still waiting on some of those follow-up sound reports and testing that was done. I don't know the results of it at this point, so I couldn't comment on that.
But were those changes implemented before or after the lawsuit was filed?
They were before, as far as I know. I don't think there's a lawsuit been filed yet.
The local health department district for that.
For Bristol.
Is moving forward seeking formal legal action.
Right, okay. Okay. Sorry if I misspoke, but,
Maybe, I'm sorry, Susan, just so that, because nobody's going to hear you online, and we are going to take a transcription of this, if you don't mind coming to the podium. Thanks. Thanks, Kevin.
Yes, just to clarify, so legal action lawsuit, well,
Right.
with local health, we do have regulatory authority to issue orders and issue notices of violation. So you are very correct in the time frame, even though you weren't there, and I came into this, some of this as well myself, but there have been some actions taken from Reworld to mitigate this, but it hasn't been enough.
Okay.
And so that's where we're at. They have definitely tried to collaborate and put their, efforts into remedying the situation. It's just not been enough. And so at this point, the district will be moving forward. It's my understanding, and we work collaboratively with them. So once things move forward, we'll know. And it's my understanding that it'll be a more formal and less collaborative approach.
And you proved my point, and I appreciate your clarification.
Sure.
Thank you both.
Sure.
Any other questions for either?
Jack?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Valera, for coming this evening. As you know, I was actually holding my questions for you because obviously you work for you're the director of the Bristol Resource Recovery. So I have my background, obviously, I was an owner of HQ Dumpsters and Recycling. I've used the Covanta facility for about 15 years. I can tell you personally, I've sat in lines there for over 3 hours. I've watched them stack trash in that building. So to say that it runs smoothly, and the other gentleman this evening, says, when it's operating properly, there should be no concerns. My concern is I've seen that facility operate, and I'm very concerned that when it's not operating properly, it's catastrophic, and that's just with MSW. So what will happen to the material that is being brought into that separate building? Will it just be housed there during outages? Will it be out the doors? Because there's been times at the Covanta facility, you pull in and you back into the pits. There's been times that we couldn't pull in. They made us go around the building, back in the exit door, and dump it because it was literally going out the door. So, this is this is what I've done, over the years is haul trash. And, I'm very familiar with the radioactive stuff. We actually had an airplane part that cost $7,000. It was, I think it was an attitude indicator for an aircraft, and it had a special gas in it. So I understand those mechanisms, they work very good. A lot of what we've seen is medical waste that sets those off. So will this material also be going through, those scanners? Because, again, sometimes it's somebody that, has a diaper that had a medical procedure, and that diaper now throws off that radioactive scanner. So my question is, will this material be still scanned?
It's my understanding that anything that comes into any of the plants to go through the incineration portion has to go across the scale. So they would all have to go over the scale where the scanners are. That can certainly be a question that can be asked, by one of the, interested municipalities in that. if the municipalities want us to handle it as, you know, Bristol Resource, then that'd be another story, but we can certainly do that. I think the municipalities have a bigger constituent stake in it and would probably want to handle it directly so that they're taking care of their own individual communities instead of a community that's a little further away. I mean, with our member towns, I mean, we're as far away as Brantford or Seymour, so, you know, they're not involved in this at all. But we can certainly do that. But those are the questions that really do need to be answered. As far as the backups and the delays, yes, Bristol plant has had those kind of delays. I will say less frequently than the other plants. Hartford was terrible for many years, and we were 2 and 3 hour delays in lines there. They would come all the way out Airport Road to the Ford dealer at times there. Bridgeport is probably the worst of it for delays at times, and there's been 4 and 5 hour delays where guys were just parking trailers down there and leaving them, and then coming back, you know, to come back after hours and try and get them emptied then. It's volume for disposal in our state is a critical issue, and the state is working on resolving that. That problem is going to be with us for a little while yet, and I don't think anybody's got the answer to it other than coming up with more capacity. Right now, we're shipping close to 40% of the state's waste out of state. And most of that's being done privately by companies that have made their own arrangements and are even bailing trash and sending it out of state wrapped.
Yeah, so I'm very familiar with how much waste goes out. Actually, I was hauling about 125 tons a day out of the state after Hartford closed. So I am very familiar with that. And that kind of leads up to my next concern is that in 10 years from now, our agreement is up with Covanta. What's to say there's no safeguards to protect us that they won't, you know, increase this more, and then we then have to ship more waste outside. And then we're taking in waste from other states, you know, that, you know, so we can't even take care of our own. So, you know, what's your thoughts or feelings in 10 years of what that landscape looks like?
As I was going through the interview process to take this position, one of the things that I was concerned with was what did we have for contracts presently, because I was not up to speed with them at that time, for both our trash and our recyclables. And Bristol Resource and all of our member towns are in a very good position right now. The recycling contracts have just been re-signed for 5 years. So we've got to worry about that 6 years down the road. And then our solid waste into Bristol has got a 10-year contract on it. And there's an option for an extension there if the plant stays maintained and is still a viable financial operation at that time. So there is an opportunity for an extension at both of the different vendors that we're dealing with, one of them being Reworld at the Covanta plant, and the recycle contract, which is Murphy Road Recycling on Christian Lane in Berlin. So we're in good shape right now, but even at the interview process, my concerns were, once I learned and did a little bit of research before accepting the position, my concerns were year 6 and year 11. And those are something that we'll start working on here. I'm 2 months into the job, so I don't want to say I'm slow out of the gate, but I'm just coming out of the gate.
So I have one last question. So
Yes, sir.
will there be any financial benefit to the Bristol Resource Recovery Authority through them doing this expansion?
There's nothing in our contract that we would share in any of their profits or anything there. The only revenue sharing that we do have in that contract is we receive a portion of their energy proceeds for what, once they're burning and they're running, what they sell for electricity. All of the member towns get a piece of that. And it's separated out by contract and a percentage.
Okay, that's it. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you,
Chair.
Jack. Bill?
I just have two quick points I'd like to make. So, and I appreciate the position you're in. I think if you polled any person in this room, we'd all say we don't want this permit expanded. So I do appreciate your position. So I guess if I could make your argument as to why I guess hypothetically, why we should support this or not oppose it, I don't think anyone wants to agree with this, is that we're gonna see a financial savings in the rates we pay because we allow them to expand their permit and grow their operations. Is that kind of what the argument is in this consortium? That's why we're gonna get there's a savings?
I don't see that there's going to be a savings for any of the member towns as it is right now. What I see is the stronger that company stays during the 10 years left in our contract, and the more viable they can remain for year 11, the better opportunity we have for the long term to extend.
Okay, so you're saying it's industry viability. It's not necessarily, we're not gonna see a dollar savings, but in year 10 or to year 11, there will be a trash plant, I mean, that exists and that we can use.
Right now, it's one of the few trash plants left that has extensions on the end of their contracts that I'm aware of. I don't believe the Preston plant had that written in with their contracts out there, although they might have been amended since I was involved with any of those. So there's potential out there for the other ones to be in a similar boat. But as in any private business out there, the more stable they are in their business, in their business model and their returns, the better they're gonna be for an option for the day after tomorrow.
I think I understand that. And so I guess my final question to you is then, we heard, so the prior presenter, he was pretty good. He knew his
Well,
stuff.
he's spot on.
I'm extremely impressed. He said he does not agree with this permit, that there's issues with the permit. Do you agree with that too? Or how would you respond to him?
I'd agree with them that there's a problem with the permit, but that is at the state level. That is not ReWorld. That is the state of Connecticut in their permit process and what's there and what they're looking for and asking for. So, yes, questions should be asked, and if we need to get state representatives and such involved to get deep to rewrite, then so be it. But it's not, anybody that's applying to put in that permit doesn't get to pick what they want to say for a permit. They've got to follow DEEP's formulas and formats on them. So that's where the shortcoming is in what they're asking for information.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Clark.
So the prior speaker spoke about actually possibly special training that might be needed for emergency response with this new added waste.
He is 100% correct in that any first responder that responds to any one of those facilities, which I am one in my hometown and have been since the 70s, we used to have the nuclear power plant in our town, and we trained at that to learn the right things to do and know whether we're going to go in and do something or we're just going to grab everybody and get the heck out. That is an absolute critical piece of any emergency response training. And from what I've seen of Bristol PD and Bristol Fire, I'm pretty comfortable that they're already doing that, but I did make a note and I will ask tomorrow morning when I go into the town hall.
Yeah, and so I would just ask, is the consortium comfortable with municipalities carrying this burden? Because there's mutual aid that's often needs to be provided. And so who carries that burden and are you comfortable with carrying that?
All of our towns that are involved are very professional. Most of them are paid departments, and I'd say they're right up to speed with everything there. But I will ask that question to make sure. And as an owner of a multi-million-dollar operation, if that were my incinerator plant, I'd have them there twice a year practicing and knowing the inside and out of my facility. Because stopping a fire on a conveyor or in a pit versus letting it come up through and consume all of your high-end technical equipment is millions and millions of dollars worth of damage that can be caused, where if the guys just know what to do when they get there, it can be stopped. So,
Well, more importantly, the damage could be what our prior speaker explained, which is not monetary. It's a health
Exactly.
risk to our first responders.
exactly.
Thank you.
Other questions? Jim? Sorry.
I wanted to shift gears a little bit, and I don't really see personally a problem with the burning part of it. My issue is, how do we ensure that the emissions that leave that stack are not contaminated. So I know that they monitor temperature and they monitor the waste going in, but I also know that there are a lot of different methods for biological detection, but it takes time to sense that also usually. So what do they have in place that they can actually test the air, and is it continuous? I heard a rumor, I heard someone say that they were going to do spot testing. That's no good. You need to know exactly what's going on at every moment. And again, I think if it's 1,000 degrees or whatever it is and you're burning waste, nothing's coming out. But if there's a blip for an hour, what came out? And so I don't know what the requirements are for the state to say that they have to test, but if I was a neighbor, I'd want to know that everything is being tested.
And I believe that's a question that should be asked, is who's monitoring and how often is it checked? I do not have the answers for that. As I said, we don't get involved in the operation of that plant, but we do go through for regular tours and make sure that it's, being kept up and the materials being moved. The issues that Mr. Perry brought up are true and genuine issues at any of our trash plants in the state. And even the old landfills. I mean, the New Milford landfill was 2-hour waits with trailers waiting out in the Stop and Shop parking lot to get into it. It's a problem all across the state.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I got one last question. In the event there is an issue there, and there is a liability, what is the liability of the 14 communities? Southington has 2 Superfund sites, and we were the dumping grounds from New Jersey to Maine. I've heard stories of, back in the day, that's just how it was. And I do know that some of those users of those 2 facilities, they had, been held liable. So what safeguards are in play for the 14 communities that in the event something happens, and we find out in 20 years from now, I just don't want them pointing the finger of, hey, it was your waste, and it kind of is your liability. Because it's being mixed at that point.
That would be a legal question to go before, environmental, attorneys on that. I do know that if it does get labeled, if anything gets labeled as a Superfund site, the federal laws take over, and they are far-reaching all the way back to heirs of people and things. The Naugatuck landfills were a prime case of that back in the 70s and 80s here in Connecticut.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Jack. Kevin, can you tell me the proposal? Is the proposal to take both treated and untreated infectious wastes?
I didn't see anything in there for treated, so I don't know. I believe that if it's treated, I believe that can actually come in almost as regular MSW now. They have to catalog it coming in.
It wouldn't be. Would it still be considered Class A at that point?
No, if it's been gone through an autoclave, it drops it out of Class A, and I'm not sure they're going to be taking Class A here.
I would it'd be highly unlikely
Yeah.
that any facility, this is still a can of worms out there from the Ebola crisis. That has yet to be resolved.
So just so I'm clear, we don't believe that they are planning with this application to take in untreated infectious waste.
I mean,
Treated.
Treated would be something that went through to another facility, went through an autoclave
Right.
process or something along those lines.
To remove the infectious disease component, right?
Correct.
That's what the treatment's for. So just so my question is clear, is the application to bring in untreated infectious waste, meaning the highest potential risk to occupational?
I don't believe they're looking for the high-end infectious wastes. I don't see that in this application. And the Class A materials that we referred to earlier is not part of what this is.
Because I thought I read the application from 2022 and it did say Class A infectious waste. Do you recall, Ed?
I'd have to go back and look at it. I don't think the state would, there would be additional SOPs that would have to be put in place for handling that material.
So that was going to be my question, was if they are planning on bringing in infectious waste, how do they plan to treat it? Because they're going to have to treat it before incinerating it, right? I mean, I'm assuming they wouldn't incinerate untreated waste.
Yeah, and I'm not sure we actually have a Class A emergency medical facility in the state at this point. That would be something we'd have to go research.
Okay, so we're uncertain.
The emergency rooms would receive somebody coming in that was ill, and if they came in with Ebola, there would be a complete lockdown of some sort, whatever their local protocol is. But I don't think we've got anybody permitted as a facility here for.
So then,
Yale and Harvard would be prepared to a certain degree.
so that'll be something that we'll ask Kevin, Susan, if you can touch base with Kevin on, and let's try to clarify that sooner than later so we know what we're up against on this. We talked about percentage. We talked about the, what the current incinerator is approved for, whatever the number is. Do we know what the percentage of their capacity, what's the utilization right now?
I believe, I don't have that number. I believe they're running at about the high 80s, low 90 percentages, but I don't have the exact number.
So they have some capacity to bring additional material in without necessarily cutting. They're not at 100%, you don't believe?
I don't believe they are.
Okay. I have a couple more questions, but the first thing is, between Susan and you, Kevin, I don't know who has the access to it, but I'd like us to make public any of the testing that's been done on the noise. Who can do that? There's been private tests, there's been town tests. We should publicize who did the test, where they were, what were the results, and that should be made available to the public. So who can do that?
I know the only one that really has authority, as far as I know, would be the Public Health Agency to push for that information.
Okay.
And I think you guys could collaborate together on that, right? So
This, I'm assuming the rest of the council members here would support requesting our health director to look into that and see if we can make that study public? Okay. Thank you, Susan. And then we would provide that to any public member who was interested in having that. Just, can you explain the committee for me? 14 municipalities, 13 municipalities. You're the executive director, right?
yes, 14 total municipalities. I say 13 because 13 of them deliver material here to the plant. One of them delivers to the Preston plant as part of it, which is also associated with ReWorld.
Are we the only communities providing material to this plant, or are there others?
No, there are other communities that are not members to us.
And what percentage of their business do our 13 or 14 communities represent? Do you know?
The plant itself is set to be able to handle about 260,000 ton a year. Our 14 communities combined total generate about 160 to 165,000 ton a year. So we are their major customer.
And what exactly, you referred to the committee as an operating committee. Can you tell me what the charge of the committee is? What specifically is it that you all are responsible for?
Well, I'm going to be embarrassed to say this because it really is to administer the contracts that are there and take care of the day-to-day business needs of the committee. So right now, it's take care of the contracts and make sure. I'm trying to get out and visit all of the 14 towns, get better acquainted with them, get more active with our household hazardous waste collections, and see what we can do to drive that up. One of the bigger things that I think we really need to do is clean up all of our recycling that we have from our member towns. The percentage of contamination that we have is starting to climb up, and with our recycling contract, we have a set price, basically called a gate rate price, in our contract, which is better than the non-contracted gate rate price. But if we keep our recyclables cleaner, they generate a better value. We get an average daily commodity rate of what our recyclables is worth, and that gets deducted off of our tip fees going in there. So if the tip fee going in is $85 a ton, but our commodity rate is $35, then we're paying the difference. It comes off, and we get that's monitored every single month, so we see what the percentage of contamination is. I want to drive that contamination rate down better and do better jobs in our local communities of cleaning up the recycling. There's so much wishful recycling that goes on, and Jack would be able to tell you. People, if they think they're recycling dishes, they're throwing kitchen dishes in there thinking it's glass. They're not, they're Pyrex or what have you. They ruin at least 20 ton of good glass if we got those type of ceramics or Pyrex into the loads. So getting people to be more aware and do a better job of recycling would help our finances for all of the constituents in all of the towns, because they're paying, a lot of cases, it's a private subscription hauler. They're paying, a monthly rate. The more it costs the hauler to get rid of the trash, the more they're paying. So our contracts are very lucrative for the industry right now in all of Connecticut. Our rates for disposal for trash and recycles with the credits that we get are probably some of the best in state.
And why is that?
My predecessor did a very good job of negotiating these contracts. The towns did an extremely good job of sticking together all of those years as a 14 town. You guys have far more horsepower now politically, legislatively, and the volume-wise. Covanta's got one contract to worry about for 75% of their daily capacity.
And so you talked about cleaning up the waste and having some of the recyclables and contamination. Are these topics that the committee takes up?
Yes,
Do you have regular agenda items that the committee takes up?
yes, we do.
And so have you had this topic taken up by your committee?
We've talked about it briefly as I came on board. I did an interview, did a second interview. A job offer was made, but they wanted to have a little bit of a, what would you do in your first 90-day conversation? So I put a small plan together and, presented when we went and accepted and before we signed the contract. And composting is one of the things I want to look closer at for our towns. Cleaning up the recycling, year 6 and year 11 are something that we need to start talking about. And the problem that we have in this state with not enough void capacity for the trash that we're generating as a state, because the United States as a whole is a very wasteful nation. And we need to work on that. So getting that on the table with the environmental groups, with our Boy Scout troops, with our school groups, get recycling coordinators back into the schools to get the kids and start doing things better, I think is all things that we've got to look at in the big picture to do a better job. So that would be part of what Bristol Resource Recovery is going to be doing with our towns.
How does the Bristol Resource Recovery Committee, who sets the strategy? What I'm trying to get at is why hasn't this been taken up in a formal vote of the committee, whether you support this or not? What's the reason for that? Why wouldn't your committee take an opinion on this and whether you support this or not as a committee?
The committee itself is the mayors of the 14 towns.
Okay.
So they're my bosses. I've spoken, on this. I know the president of the board, which is the mayor for Bristol. Jeff has met with and worked with the executive group on it, which is just several of the mayors. And they're the ones that set that strategy on that. So I'm basically their hired hand.
And are there meeting minutes from your discussion about this topic with the committee that detailed what everybody's perspective is, all the mayors of this, whether people support this or don't support this?
There hasn't been a vote on this topic at all. It's been discussed that there was an issue with a noise issue. We meet quarterly, so since this thing has cropped up and the changeover from the previous executive director to myself, there hasn't been a full-blown conversation in a board meeting for it to get an opinion on that.
Okay, so I think we need to figure out where you mentioned that we're 55, 60% of the volume, which means that we have a strong voice.
Oh, yeah.
We carry a strong voice. I'm trying to figure out whether that strong voice is really your committee or if it's the council members and in all these communities. Can you give me?
If the mayors were to get together and say they wanted Bristol Resource to, form a letter, then that's what we would do.
Okay.
The politicians are the policy setters here, and I'm a facilitator in that case.
Okay, now I understand. Thanks, Kevin. Any other questions? Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you, Susan and Ed, as well. Okay. You okay? Everybody's okay? Okay. Okay, why don't we move on to councilperson communications? I know there's been a lot of us communicating. Anybody got any more? Chris?
Got a couple. First of all, it's been a while since our last meeting, so I'd like to thank the organizers for the Italian Festival. I know many of us attended the event downtown. I know he just stepped out of the room. I wanted to give a shout out to our town manager who, oh, here he comes. Our town manager who represented us in the opening ceremonies and brushed up on his Italian to be able to share that to the community. Alex, I don't know if yours were ringing, but I'm
You got a
sharing.
shout out for your Italian skills.
Yeah, there you go. So again, thank you to the organizers for that. I'd also like to just thank Dave LaPre. I mentioned at the last council meeting, several seniors had reached out to me about the concern with the cap and the lunch program offered from our calendar house. And he has met with the organization that runs the lunch program and has communicated to the members that for the months of August and September at least, they've lifted that cap so they can allow as many seniors as sign up and are interested to take part in the lunch program. And I understand from talking with Mr. LaPre, it is a suggested donation, but it's not really a fee for our seniors. It's again, a suggested donation to take part in the lunch program. So I just want to thank them and appreciate the follow-through.
Thank you, Chris. Jim? Sorry.
As Chris said, I also attended the Italian Festival, and it was a wonderful weekend with a lot of fun, and I think they did a fantastic job, so thanks for that. I did want to also thank Christina Volpe. I got a chance to go to the Barnes Taste of Southington last Thursday, I think it was, and they had a really great band there that was playing some jazz music and some, reasonably nice songs you could sing to. And there were a lot of food vendors there, and it was really a nice spattering of Southington. So I just wanted to say thank you for that. She did a great job.
Thank you, Jim. Anybody else? Nobody else? I know, testing 1, 2. Can you guys, yeah, can you maybe? I know we had some backflips going on the town green, too.
Oh.
Maybe, Candace, do you want to come on up and tell us? And I think that this is a great opportunity. I saw some wonderful pictures. I saw a lot of backpacks. And I believe this is your second event. So congratulations and thank you.
What do you say?
Thank you.
Do you want me to lift you up or do you want me to move it? You're
Tell us.
short.
Just start off by telling us your name.
I'm Evelyn.
Hi, Evelyn.
What's your last name?
Holly.
Thank you.
Okay.
I want to thank Uncle Jack and Chris for donating backpacks to my event. I want to thank Melissa, Regina, and volunteering community for supporting my backpack event. As a team, we helped a lot of kind kids who are in need. Thank you.
High
Thank
five,
you
Deb.
so much, Evelyn. Congratulations.
Say thank you.
Thank you.
How about we give Evelyn a round of applause? For
Yeah, this.
Evelyn raised a lot of money.
It was a wonderful day for all the community. It was one of the best days I've had in a long time, watching this wonderful little girl.
Congratulations,
Something
Evelyn,
for
and thank
you.
you so much. We're looking forward to seeing you next year, okay? All right. Okay. Anybody else on councilperson communications? Why don't we move on to the report of special committees, the SHS roof.
Yes, the committee met on Thursday, July 18th. Just a couple updates, especially for Southington High School families. The freshman wing of the roofing was completed first. The north half of the roof was completed by the end of July, so they're making good progress. And then the goal, obviously, is to have everything completed well in advance of the first day of school back for our students. The rain last week certainly didn't help matters, but they should be done in time for school to begin. And we're also looking at designs for the solar portion of the project, so that is being examined as well. We also had to approve a change order. It was to Silktown Roofing for $28,092.19. It was a design change that had to be made, but it will help maintain the 30-year warranty, which is obviously in the big picture what we care more about. And then we also approved at the July 18th meeting 2 invoices for $522,082 and just over $1 million, which were invoices, again, for Silktown Roofing, all within the budget that's planned for this project.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions on the roof project? Okay, thanks, Chris. Let's move on to item B, Economic Strike Committee. Mr. Del Santo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had our meeting on August 6th. I want to have Lou Perillo come up. He's the Southington Economic Development Director. Lou, if you give us just a brief understanding of the 2 highlighted items from our meeting.
Thanks for hanging in there, Lou.
Yeah.
Me, I think these guys deserve a patient's merit badge or something. Hi, Lou Perillo, Southington Economic Development Director. This evening, we have a request from Mount Southington for an abatement for 2 of their projects they did. They did a chairlift, the North Ridge Triple Chair, $650,000 investment, and they built a snow sports building for $400,000. So the projects are eligible for our tax abatement. They are requesting it. The project was reviewed by our Economic Development Strike Committee on August 6th, and the committee unanimously suggested that the town council approve this tax abatement. And as you know, Mount Southington is an incredible resource, especially as part of our recreation destination program.
Excellent. Any questions on the Mount Southington? Excellent, okay. And hotel tax abatement?
Okay, we have interest in a hotel potentially developing in town. So they are requesting an abatement. We've done this in the past. Usually they're in the enterprise zone, so they take advantage of that. We had a project for a hotel improvement. That was a 5-year deal. Minimum expenditure, I think it was $200,000 in 10 rooms. That expired in 2014. So we are proposing specific language for a public hearing at the next available council meeting. I think you might have a handout coming to you, but what it is, do you want me to read it or do you want it put into the minutes? Okay.
Sure, why don't you read
So, forgive me for reading it, but it's a tax abatement for hotels. Any applicant constructing a new hotel in the town of Southington with a construction cost exceeding $3 million in taxable real property improvements shall be eligible for a tax abatement consisting of 5 years with the following schedule. Year 1, 100%. Year 2, 100%. Year 3, 100%. Year 4, 50%. Year 5, 50%. An application shall be filed with the Economic Development Office, and the Economic Development Strike Committee shall make a recommendation to the Town Council. The Town Council may approve or deny an application at its sole discretion. Unless further action is taken by the Town Council, this tax abatement plan shall expire on June 30th, 2026. It applies to real property improvements only, not the land and not personal property. So the reason we like tax abatements for hotels. Hotels are a tremendous investment on a small piece of property. Usually they're about 1.5 acres, and the investment is anywhere from $5 to $14 million or more. You're hard pressed to find any other taxable entity that pays that much other than like a medical office building. The property owners that we receive, usually, if you notice the benefits of a hotel, if you look on West Street and whatnot, the new hotels, they're bringing in travelers. Travelers, generally speaking, spend money in our community and they stay. As the town council knows, and for the public's edification, we're trying, as part of one of our economic development strategies, is recreation destination. We want people to enjoy Lake Compounce, Mount Southington, the other venues at Factory Square, which is all experiential, and we're capitalizing on that. So when you see, for example, Mount Southington, that's starting to expand into the summer programs, these are great things, and we want to encourage people to stay here. Hotels are very expensive. When you get into the credit necessary to develop a hotel, interest rates are a main factor in whether or not they're going to be profitable. So for one particular property, we've had attempts for over 8 years, can't get anything. And just for the public's edification, if you look at, for example, a Dunkin' Donuts or a retail store, might bring in $15,000 to $19,000 in some personal property for taxes, a couple of jobs. Hotels can be anywhere from $120,000 to $250,000. There's a multiplier effect. They need a lot of services. Plus the other avenue is they pay a lot of personal property taxes, anywhere from $35,000 to $75,000. Plus the land is always taxed. But you're bringing in people from out of town, which is a real benefit because of the multiplier effect. And I'm here for any questions you may have.
Any questions on this? Chris?
I just have a question. I support the abatement itself. Just a question about the amount over the years. Is the 3 years 100% abatement in line with other tax abatements, with a similar program? Is that, 3 full years of 100% abatement?
The tax abatement for the enterprise zone is a 7-year deal, 100% for the first 2 years, 50%, 40, 30, 20, 10.
Okay.
Interest rates when the other hotels were developed were significantly lower. So, and usually when you do financing for a pro forma, the first 5 years are significant. So in my experience with the tax abatements and whatnot, they're instrumental. Sometimes they'll take a letter that I'll provide the applicant to submit to their bank with the council's approval, so it's documented.
Okay.
And just for logistics' sake, when we do get to new business, what we'll be looking for under the action for hotel tax abatement is to schedule the public hearing for September 9th, 2024 at 7 p.m., which is our next town council meeting. And that will be on the policy only at this point, adopting the policy. Yep, Jack.
So I have a quick question. It says it expires on June 30th, 2026. Now, if we do this, I just try to look 5 years from now, does this then become null and void, or is this just a policy or an application until the 2026?
If I may respond?
Yeah, this is just the plan. Right.
This is the abatement plan, and what happens is we allow them to sunset, so they don't go on in perpetuity. If no one takes advantage of the plan, it dies. Very similar to some of the other ones we've done, like the hotel improvement tax. I think it was for dedicated towards like a Knights Inn, but then Knights Inn got torn down. We prefer to sunset them so that we feel it's the most conservative to our existing residents. So these are tools. We're trying to entice someone to come in to pump $5 to $7 million or $10 million into our economy. It's not just the tax abatement, but when you're building, they're going to be using concrete, tradesmen, many business services, and hopefully our businesses in town get to bid on them. Generally speaking, oftentimes when you're constructing something large like a Dewey Piles parking garage, many of those construction workers stay in the hotels 5 days a week. So they do sunset, and if you notice in the language that we wrote at the council's, it says you can approve or deny it. It's at your sole discretion. And if you want to extend it, you can take further action. If you don't take further action, then it expires.
Just to elaborate on that. So if we approve a hotel that's going up and we approve it in 2025, does that mean if we don't approve this plan again, they don't even qualify for the full 5 years? They do, right?
They
'Cause
do.
applied
Once they
prior to.
apply and get accepted.
Yeah, that's what
That
I
was
thought.
my, yeah, that
That's
was
what I
my
thought.
question.
So I wanted
It's
to
just the
clarify.
policy, the policy's no
Anyone
longer
who's-
available to anybody.
Right.
Right. And I think that that's good, because then, the economic climate can change quite drastically. And, quite frankly, if we put this out there as a 10-year plan, then, you might not get people who are interested in coming in short-term. So this is really to try to expedite somebody coming into town and to capture that tax base.
And then the other thing, if I may, exactly right. So what it does is it's an incentive, which is a tool. If they know they have 5 years, they could extend the building. We could say, you got your program, so you'd have to reapply, you'd have to come before the council, and then the council could weigh the importance of it. If we become a mecca where there are a lot of hotels that want to come in, then you might not want to do an abatement. But we're not seeing that in this environment. And when you get into competition, such as Airbnb and VRBO, there's challenges out there. And the financing world recognizes those challenges.
Jack, you had another question?
Yeah, so I obviously am in favor of this. My business was in the enterprise zone, and that was a huge thing for us. And I think the town can see, from the finance director's reports, HQ Dumpsters and Recycling was making the report for the growth of property taxes that we were paying. So I look at it as planting seeds. You don't get, crop day one, but, right now, that property that was discussed at Economic Strike Committee, what they're paying in property taxes is hardly anything. So I think this is a tool that allows us, in 5 years to be really recouping some tax dollars. And it's a tool that helps businesses and, their banking relationships and all that. They look at all this, and I think that's very important. So Lou, thank you for putting this forward.
Other questions? My only clarification I wanted to make on this is, do we need to strengthen the language? Or maybe it's just clarifying, and maybe this is really for the council, but any applicant constructing a new hotel, and differentiating between a motel, whereas a motel has a different feature than a hotel. Hotels typically an interior lobby, typically, what we see on West Street today with the Courtyard and with the Homewood Suites. So I would just like to point out that this does say hotel, it does not say motel. So, I wanted to just check everybody's pulse here, because if something comes up as a motel in the future, we should be clear about what the intent of this is. So my perspective is that there is a difference between a hotel and a motel, and maybe to the town's attorney.
Yeah, I can probably answer that, Mr. Chair. That would be a subjective decision made when an application is made. So depending how narrow or broad the council determines or decides to interpret the word hotel, that would all be made at the time of making a decision on a specific application.
So you don't think we should specify it here?
I don't think it's relevant. I don't think it's necessary. I apologize.
Okay. Okay, any other questions for the Economic Development Coordinator? Hotel tax abatement, thank you, Lou. Appreciate you sticking around. All right, item C.
I have a couple.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're still on
Chair,
economic
yeah,
strike.
thanks,
I
Lou.
didn't see an item
Well,
3,
Lou-
but please.
Lou handled the two big ones. But some other action at the committee on last Tuesday, was that the town of Plantsville obviously is under construction, and myself and the chair and Councilman Palmieri did a walkthrough with the town manager and Lou a couple of weeks ago, and we saw some opportunity to help some of the businesses down there. So we gave authorization to the Economic Development Director to use some of his funds to partner up with the Chamber of Commerce to help some of these businesses get some signs out, do some PR stuff, to try to advertise to folks, to let everyone know that they are still in business. Even though there's lots of construction down there, we're doing all we can to make sure that those businesses are on the forefront, and we're gonna make sure that people know that they're still open. So, right, okay, we have some signs going out as well. Every business is gonna get a sign that says open for business, nice and bright, so everyone knows. So, businesses down there need to know that we have their back throughout this construction. It's pesky, but we're going to get through it, and when it's done, it's going to look wonderful, but at this point, they need to know that we have their back. So in keeping with the chamber, we also made a decision to bring back some of the breakfast in the mornings with the town chamber. I know, Mr. Chair, you've been to some of those in the past. We haven't done it in a long time, so we're going to bring those back. So we authorized Lou to have 3 within the next year and a half. And it's a good opportunity to help some local businesses. We get great speakers that come to them to try to help with small business or large business. Some of the topics in the past have been promotions and how to advertise their business. So those will be coming up, some more to follow on that. And we also authorized the Economic Development Director to get working again on the West Pines Drive, Spring Street lining up, and Curtis Street and West Street. We know those are 2 heavy pinch points. We've noticed many accidents in the last couple of weeks at those 2 spots. So Lou is going to be talking with some property owners on that road to try to make some changes to try to line up the West Pines Drive and Spring Street. I know we've talked about it before. It fizzled out, but we're back to the drawing board on that. We're going to try to make it work. That's all I had. I'm not
Wonderful.
sure. I know Councilman Perry was there at the meeting, if he had anything to add, if I forgot anything.
No, that was it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Del Santo, on economic strike. Okay, item C, transportation. Tony.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Transportation Committee is a brand-new committee. It was set up at the last council meeting before last. We've had 2 meetings already to get things going. First was an organizational one. It was just to get everything moving. We voted Councillor Clock as vice chair. And we also decided what essentially we were going to do, essentially in the first few meetings. The first things we're going to do is to concentrate on data. What data we have right now for various transport capabilities, and maybe what's possible in the future. So, the first meeting was pretty much only about data, and the data we have so far is interesting. I'd like to give a shout out to the Calendar House, for instance, who presented in financial year 23 to 24, the one we just finished. They service 266 customers, of which split into services less than 60 with no disability, greater than 60 were disabled, and less than 60 were not, who were not disabled. The rides, they did 10,444 one-way rides, and the type of rides, the main one was social recreation, about 3,000. Medical was 2,500. So essentially the Calendar House is doing a pretty good job with what they have right now. And what they have right now is a couple of minivans and also the ability to utilize outside capabilities like RSVP organizations who do this as well. Second thing was the bus, the new bus the bus line that came into town. We've had 5 months of ridership on that bus. We have an average, according to the state, of 64 passengers per day, they told us, which is 1.7 passengers per trip, because we have 38 trips per day, according to the schedule. Rides, the highest number was in July, the last month, and they had just over 2 passengers per trip. The rides were 80. Essentially, we had 80 passengers on that. This is just average for a month, okay? It's not an individual day, it's average for the month. And that's the bus. Some miscellaneous stats. We have 5 folks signed up through the state for paratransit, which can be used in combination with the bus or not. Not, because it'll be a separate thing. We looked at some Uber Wave paratransit pricing, which is actually fairly reasonable, surprising. $30 for a 20-mile one-way ride. That's not a bad deal. We looked at microtransit, which, well, we're going to look at that a little bit more in the future, because it's an interesting future option for us. It's essentially an aggressive customer demand-driven form of transport, as opposed to a passive schedule-driven transit, which is obviously our bus. I've had some experience with it in Asia. I ran an operation in India for a while, and we used that capability essentially to ferry people to and from, the actual place where people worked. It works out very well. There aren't any bus lines. A lot of Asian countries, there's a huge amount of microtransit. We've missed state grants to develop this. They did give out state grants to several municipalities. Southington wasn't one of them because they wanted to put the bus in, and they said it might conflict with it. I don't think that's the case, but we'll wait and see. But that was then. In the future, that might be different. The grants could be available again, or we could develop something ourselves. And the Calendar House gives us sort of a model on somewhere to go in the future. The next meeting, we're going to finish off the data collection. Next meetings, I should say, because there'll be more than one. We need to look at some stakeholder presentations from certain organizations in town, and we need to discuss a method of creating a survey for the town's transportation need, from if there's anything essentially we're missing. So that's the Transportation Committee. Jen,
Any questions?
No, you summarized it great.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you. Any questions about transportation? Wonderful. Okay, before we're going to go on to Public Works, Mike, if there's any of the scouts out here, anybody need a drink? Anybody thirsty? You can come up here while we're talking. Just come right around and I'll get you a cup. Right here. Come on around. Come on around. We're going to keep talking. If you want a drink, come on up. And Mr. Del Santo, if you could just come around nice and quietly, okay? We're going to keep the meeting going. Mr. Del Santo.
No pressure at all. We had our Public Works meeting on Wednesday, August 7th. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I highlighted earlier, we know that there's construction in downtown Plantsville, so we had a long discussion about some of the work that's being done down in Plantsville. So we did that walkthrough with the town manager and the chairman and Mr. Palmieri and Mr. Perillo, and we had a kind of a punch list that we wanted our engineering department to kind of really oversee to ensure that we're getting the best quality work and things are going to be done on time and somewhat within budget. I know some of the changes that we did make or some of the enhancements that we're going to make did probably cost us a few extra weeks. We're still in the hopes to get this project done by the first of the year. That all depends on a lot of factors. So we are, the engineering department knows now that this is a priority, that they'll be out there at least a couple of times, 1 or 2 times a day to ensure that the work is being done correctly and a good quality work. The recreation pool house floor, Councilman Palmieri brought it to our attention that there were some slippery areas. So the builders are going to come back and fix it. The problem is it would probably take a couple of days, so they wanted to make sure that the pool remained open. So in the meantime, that we put some mats down, which took care of the problem temporarily, and after the pool closes next month, they'll go back and they'll scruff up the floor, and there's a process to make it so it's not as slippery anymore. So they're working closely with us to do it. And other than that, Mr. Chair, we did talk about having defibrillators put into all 3 of our parks. I got a phone call a few months ago from a resident in town who's a business owner, and he wanted to anonymously donate some money to have an AED placed in one of the parks. So we are going to order 3 AEDs, 1 for each major park, and the person who owns the business is going to donate the 1 for Memorial Park because a family member plays baseball there. So it's a total of around $7,500 for the 3 units, and they'll be put up on the concession stands in the 3 parks, and this gentleman is going to donate $2,500 for one of the AEDs. So more to follow on that. We'll have more announcements probably at the next meeting as to when they're put up. Questions?
That's good stuff. Questions on Public Works?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Del Santo. All right, library building. Jim?
We had a meeting of the Library Building Committee last Wednesday, the 7th, and prior to the meeting, we took a tour of the library to see the progress. They're on schedule. There's sheetrock up in almost every room. There's a lot of painting done. The ceilings are going in. The fire suppression system is active. and the utilities are all active. So they're really on schedule. It's looking wonderful. We were able to see some of the finishes on the outside. You'll see one of the terracotta colors already in the corner, and you'll see more of the siding going up in the next couple weeks. Another thing to mention is that the north end of the library, where there's a big conference area, there'll be an outdoor patio, and there's a brick naming fundraiser going on right now. So if you want to donate a brick with your family name on it, get a hold of the library board. It's also online on the library's webpage. And that's about it. So it looks like we're still on schedule for November opening.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Any questions about the library? Awesome. Sewer. Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll try and be quick on this, even though I've got quite a few things. But just the first thing, we did discuss sewer billing again. We have made quite a bit of progress with the fact that we have quite a few people who aren't, shall we say, paying their bills. One in particular is a real thorn in the side, which is the bill to Athena Healthcare for the summit, our capability in town. It's up to $129,000 right now. They haven't paid anything since July 2022. I've called them a few times, started with accounts payable and work your way up to the CFO. And for some reason, they stopped returning my calls. And when I did call, it goes to voicemail for some coincidence there. Be trying to push on that. I've asked the town manager to give me the email addresses of every other town manager who has an Athena capability in town to say, are they just focusing on us, or are they not paying their sewer bills anyway? It's easy not to pay your sewer bill, by the way, because you can't turn it off. You can't turn the service off. So people tend to, so anyway, that we have to do something about that because it's getting too much for us to tolerate. Okay, in terms of other things, we approved a $1.5 million quote for the sewer lining work. We tend to do $500,000 to $1 million of this every year in order to ensure our clay pipes, which shows signs of damage, are lined with polystyrene. So we went with a company called Institutiform, and we actually do know these people because they swallowed up a company called Granite Inliner, which was our vendor up until a few months ago. So we know the people. The pricing is based on an NDC contract for the Gullybrook area sewer and lateral rehabilitation. The contract is, that contract is yet to be approved. It's going to be approved momentarily. So we approved it based on the date of approval of that particular contract. And that will come up to Town Council in the fullness of time. The 3-pump station project, as you may know, we're going through all of our pump stations to redo them. We've been doing that the last 2 or 3 years. That's pretty much done. We just put a change order in to push the substantial completion dates, which is June, and the final completion date to August, and then it will be done. Done under budget, which was very nice. The West Street pump station, though, we've had an evaluation by Time Bond, and they show that the work here will be in excess of $1 million, which puts us in an interesting position because we're able to do some of the pump stations before, either by using our own money from the sewer or by using the ARPA funds. This will mean we'll need to strategize on what to do here, because this will mean, because it's over $1 million, you'll have to put it up for referendum, take the money from reserves, and we have other large capital projects, which we all know, which are being proposed at this point. So where that fits in is going to be interesting. We can leave it, obviously, for a few years, but we're trying to get the whole, everything in the sewer capability, redone. discuss about that, and it'll probably come up to town council as well. It's over $1 million because just for some issues to do with the pump station itself, it's a different structure than, say, the three ones that we just dealt with. So it's more expensive. We're going to do a sewer line rapid assessment, which essentially every year we do this. We look at a certain amount of linear feet of sewer piping to essentially look for potential issues coming up. We gave that contract to Duke's Root Control, who've done the work for us before, using the HCAC Cooperative Purchasing Program. They're one of the vendors for that. And the pricing is $27,678. It will come up to Town Council next. And the next final item, we also awarded A&J Generator a contract to service the plant generators. It's the best of 4 quotes for this work, and it's $10,975. It's not a lot of money. The reference is from 2 other municipalities and the Connecticut Federal Courthouse. We're very positive. And we approved $12,073 for the work for reasons of 10% contingency. Again, this will come up to the Town Council. That's it.
Thank you, Councilman Morrison. Any questions regarding sewers? Okay, and that's going to wrap up report of special committees. Thanks, everybody, for the continued diligence in driving these initiatives through the committees. We very much appreciate it. Okay, Mr. Town Manager, you're up. Item A, report of Board of Finance.
I will be brief, Mr. Chairman. The Board of Finance met last week, August 6, 2024. One big thing of note, the annual audit's starting next month and should be wrapped up by the end of the year. Minutes are in your packet. The second thing I have is the arbitration award came down with the firefighters union contract on July 5th of 2024. Town Council is going to need to formally ratify that. The union president or vice president will be coming to sign off in my office tomorrow, so that should be, and we do want to express our thanks to the firefighters through this time. I know it's not been easy, but we appreciate all they do and all their hard work. The third thing I have is a Homeland Security grant resolution. This is through, this is money that we don't get all the time, but it's pooled within the region. And some of the things that this money comes through is our SWAT vehicle was purchased with this. This is a regional grant. And we need to you have to authorize me to submit some documents to the state so we are eligible to get this money. I do have model language that can be used. Any questions on that? And finally, the last one is the CROG Hazard Mitigation and Climate Adaptation Plan Resolution. This simply is a FEMA requirement that in the event that the town had a disaster that would qualify for FEMA aid, this is a plan that has to be adopted prior to us getting that aid. So we want to make sure it's in place so we are FEMA eligible. If we don't have this in place, we will not be eligible for any FEMA aid whatsoever. Any questions on the FEMA?
So these are 4 items, Mr. Town Manager, that we're looking for action under old business. Any questions that the Town Manager can answer?
Just a question on the last one. So that's any climate issues such as a tornado or anything, we're covered, right?
We can apply.
We can apply.
Sorry.
It makes us eligible
Makes us
to
eligible.
apply, yes.
Right, okay, got
So
it.
if the governor files an emergency and the president gives it to us, we can apply.
We got it, got it.
And just briefly, I did hear some comments about town employees coming to work in the heat policy. The heat policy and procedure has been adopted by me as of this morning. Employees do not get the day off of work if it's over 90 degrees. It's a technical document, and it allows the supervisors to just really incentivize additional rest, hydration, and cooling in the event we do have some extreme weather, because we don't want our folks out there exposing themselves to unnecessary risk in the event of extreme weather. So that was implemented earlier today as well. That concludes my report.
Okay. Jim?
Do we already have a plan that we can modify for the action plan? Climate adaptation plan?
We do. It was approved by the state. earlier this year in Prague, and we just have to modify it. We just
Okay.
have to accept it. We previously had the plan in 2016 and 2019, so this is the third go-around with it with a few tweaks.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
It expires.
Okay, any last questions for the town manager? If not, let's move on to the town attorney's report. Mr. Town Attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At June's meeting, Councilman Palmieri asked that I look into the issue of Eversource and more particularly their obligation to maintain the sidewalks here in town as any other landowner has an obligation to do. It stems from my understanding of Eversource's blatant statement that they had no intention of maintaining or preserving their obligations per our regulations. The council has already received a copy of my legal opinion, but I'm happy to report that there is no exception. In fact, quite the opposite. The topic has been addressed by our courts, not in Southington, and certainly is solidified through the past course of conduct. Eversource is not any different than any other homeowner or business owner here in town, have the same rights, duties, and obligations as anybody else. Any
Excellent.
questions?
Questions for the town attorney? Chris?
Just a statement, Lou, I want to thank you. I really appreciate a very thorough opinion. I found very interesting how you cited the Supreme Court had an issue to review this recently and upheld the same decision that you basically just shared with us, that Eversource has a responsibility to maintain that. And I do think it's important for them, as a member of our community, to uphold the same standards that we hold to our residents.
Undoubtedly.
You know, also in your communication to us, you cite the policy about sidewalks and the installation. When I've actually taken advantage of the program myself, as any resident can. For this particular project, who is funding the installation of the sidewalk?
I believe that's the state of Connecticut.
We are.
The
The
initial
town, the town's funding it. Yep.
Okay. All right. So is that for all, the whole length of the sidewalk? So it's not just in front of the Eversource property?
Correct. Yeah, we voted on that
Yeah.
as an initiative months ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
But every other property owner along that path is going to be upheld to the same standards to
Has the
maintain
same
their sidewalk?
obligation, yes.
To maintain it.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Not for the install, but to maintain
Right.
it. Yep.
Okay.
No cost
Appreciate
for
it.
install. Yep.
Thank you.
And remember, the no cost for install was really, it was because we saw this as a conduit to the downtown, a public need, the bus was there.
Yeah.
And plus, it's also a school route for some of those streets adjacent to the high school.
Yeah.
That's a quick question.
Yes, Mr. Dietrich.
Just a quick question. So say it's our first snowstorm in November or December, hopefully not November, wow, I don't want to jinx this. But, and Eversource says, no, we're not gonna remove the snow. What happens then?
We shut their power off.
Town manager is a commercial blower, he'll go. I don't know the answer to that. It's something I guess that I need to look into. Clearly, it would be some version of a cease and desist and an obligation. I don't know the regulations. I don't believe that, I have to look into it and get back to you.
I'm just more curious, because if they're saying they don't have to do it, I don't know if this, they're probably not watching the meeting, so I don't know.
There's a
if
town
they're gonna-
ordinance, I believe, right?
There
There's
is
a
a
town
on
ordinance that
that.
gives them
And
24
I believe
hours.
there's a financial
There's a fine.
component to that. It's a relatively small component, or penalty. I could give you an exact answer to that. What I had spoken with the chairman, or perhaps Mr. Palmer, I don't remember, was it wouldn't be a bad idea for me as the town attorney to send a letter out to them sort of preemptively, indicating not so much that you've indicated an unwillingness to do so, but rather to put you on notice that you have an obligation to maintain.
Okay, so you'll do that?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Town Attorney. Okay, any other questions for the Town Attorney? Hearing none, let's move on to public communications, where we'll hear for up to 5 minutes. Any resident of the town of Southington may come up to the microphone, introduce themselves, and talk about any topic that they would like. And if you'll just state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, hi there, everyone. My name's Dawn McNerney, and I live on Mountain Pond Road, number 87 in Southington.
Hi, Dawn.
Hi.
It's all yours.
All mine, great. So first of all, thank you for having this forum. It was very informative, and I just wanted to pass on that, pass that on to you all. This is way past my bedtime, so I'm a bit tired. Bear with me as I read through some things that I jotted down as I was listening. Some of the phrases that came out were, if operating properly, waste from all over, including other countries, just manufacturing materials, legal action for noise. If a community has to take legal action to address one of the easiest forms of waste to correct, how will this look when something more toxic happens down the road? I have many, many concerns, including PFAS, that have a potential to emit from these types of plants. Will this be another DuPont that we have to worry about in the future? Also concerned when I hear speakers provide information with their comments that this is not a public health issue, because I do have a concern for that. Once you give permission, it opens up the opportunity for these plants to expand. I would expect a steady decrease of standard trash to more sensitive trash that brings in more dollars. The corporation is going to follow the money, and it's not going to care about its communities. Medical waste is a $9.2 billion industry and expected to get to 12.2 in just a few short years, and that's just in the United States. With incineration segment leading the market due to its simplicity and its convenience. As contracts run out, how willing will ReWorld be to contract if the towns block their money stream? The comment of industry viability from the Bristol speaker translates to me as a possible conflict of interest. I feel like Dorothy up here, lions and tigers and bears, oh my, except it's PFAS, mercury, lead, and other worst of the worst chemicals to be processed less than 3 miles from my house. Oh my. Anyone who doesn't have an issue, please see me after the meeting, because I have a house that I want to sell you at its current fair market value before the value plummets. Lastly, if this is so safe and not such a big deal, let's tell the state to diversify and put these plants in the wealthiest towns of Connecticut, such as Darien, Westport, Greenwich, Fairfield, New Canaan, Newton, Newtown, and other areas, instead of trying to dump them in lower income communities. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Dawn. Anybody else? Come on up. The mic is yours. Very well. How are you?
So I'm Lisa Marshall. I live next to Dawn. I'm at 77 Mountain Pond Road. I believe I kind of map quested it. I'm less than 2 miles from the facility. I have been affected by the noise, but actually have kind of gotten used to it. When the new neighbors next to me moved in and mentioned it, I was like, oh, like I don't even hear it now. But what's most concerning to me is that nothing's been done about it. So no one cares. They get their money, so it doesn't matter to, let's correct the issue. So last minute, I hear about this proposal, and so I haven't had a full amount of time to actually look up things. However, I started with looking up the company itself, and then I got concerned. I noticed numerous pages of violations. So why? And no changes. Why? I noticed court cases where people were fiddling with emissions. Why? And I don't know the results of those. However, that's concerning to me Because who's monitoring the emissions? And who's going to make sure that no fiddling around or something is going on? I wasn't concerned as much with infectious disease. I was more concerned with respiratory and cancers going around. That bothers me. I also was concerned with, there was a fire in Florida in one of these types of facilities just recently. And how did their emergency people respond? How did their community respond? I know ESPN's daycare is close by to there. What are we going to do in an emergency? I'm a nurse. I work at one of the local hospitals. I know that our emergency departments are overfilled. Most departments, we have patients sleeping by the nurses' stations in the ER. What are we going to do? He said something, nothing happens, and then he said something, oh, there's an occasional spill from a truck. How is that going to affect our environment? So if you suddenly, you have probably fire departments that will go through, he said, maybe 2 trainings a year. What if you miss one of those trainings and now suddenly a big fire like Florida takes place? How is our police department, fire department going to take care of this? Our departments are already taxed enough. How are our local hospitals going to take care of it? You know, we have New Britain, we have Southington, you know, their little department, but we're going to rush everybody to Hartford or New Haven to address a major issue. It's bad. And I don't see the company, from like my short time of researching, I don't see them addressing these issues and making changes. I almost see it as we're going to make money and let these issues happen, let violations happen, and then call it a day. And on their website, it said something about 1 to 2 trucks per hour. Well, so no increase in transportation. But you guys made good points today, which I didn't even think about. If they're at 80% capacity, now we're adding more. But how are you going to do the 1 to 2 trucks per hour? Is someone going to be monitoring when someone's coming through 84, which probably if we did the data, we have too many accidents, but it's too dangerous. And the emissions part is, it blew my mind to think, the things I was reading, I was like, how do you not say emissions is an issue? It's not safe. So I hope you change it.
Thank you, Lisa.
Good evening, Francis Pickering, 60 Panthorn Trail, Southington, just around the corner from those 2 women. I'm going to respond to the presentations made tonight. A lot of great information. I first became involved with the Covanta plant in Bristol when the noise pollution went out of control. And the fact, I have taken numerous measurements documenting that the plant is in violation not only of Bristol City ordinance, but of state law and the permit requirements in the state permit that hold it to state law. DEEP refuses to enforce state law in this case. We have a corporate bad actor who is violating state law, and what does DEEP do? They propose new permits that carry forward the existing unenforced noise pollution control requirements. They're not making any changes despite documentation of violations. When you look at the emissions controls on these plants, there are multiple issues here. There's noise, there's emissions, there's public health. The emissions controls on these plants are the EPA standards that were released in 2006. They're based upon what's called maximum available control technology, which is what the best 10 or 12% of the incinerator fleet did in the 1990s. Now, none of the cars we drive today have 1990s emissions controls. Our plant in Bristol, which is right on the city line and emits things that we all breathe here, is basically using 1990s technology. If you look at best-of-class emissions, as you see in the European Union, they are far cleaner than what we have here. And they require continuous emissions monitoring of a whole host of pollutants. Right now, that plant, Covanta will tell you, Reworld will tell you, we monitor carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxides, and opacity as a proxy for particulate matter. They don't monitor the most dangerous toxins known to man, dioxins and furans. They don't monitor heavy metals like cadmium, mercury, lead, etc., except once a year with 45-day notice in advance. They're allowed to self-test, and they're allowed to burn a different feedstock in the plant. They're allowed to burn clean trash. Anybody who's got a backyard fire or a fireplace knows some things are a lot dirtier than others. The current system is designed for gaming, and those are the requirements in the deep permit, and they're being carried forward. Frankly, we have no idea what the plant is emitting the other 364 days a year. Covanta has been found to have tampered with emissions controls. They have violated air pollution controls. We don't know what's coming out of that plant, and now we're considering adding medical waste, which has a lot of plastic when burned, releases dioxins, and PFAS. On the PFAS note, there are no requirements in the deep permit for PFAS. EPA does not recommend burning PFAS in an MSW incinerator. They recommend combusting it in a hazardous waste incinerator, which is a different type of plant. Actually, EPA also sets different standards that are 80% more stringent for medical waste incinerators. But for an MSW incinerator that burns medical waste, those standards don't apply. Everywhere you look, the standards are like fishnet, just full of holes you can drive a bus through. So there has been some discussion. This is not a public health issue. The problem here is that public health has not been brought into an issue that is a public health issue, and we frankly don't know what's going on because we have no data. DPH hasn't reviewed the permits. It's been deep addressing issues that need to have some public health involvement. Looking at the biomedical aspect of infection, it's highly unlikely that anything would survive incineration at those high temperatures, assuming it's operating correctly. But when we've looked at incinerators in other places in the country, startup, shutdown, and malfunctions or interruptions are when things get through. If you start a campfire, it often smokes at first. We don't have any documentation of what's going on at the plant. The permits don't require the incinerator not to burn biomedical waste during startup and shutdown. There are no requirements at all regarding that. And as for transport, they don't prohibit Category A waste. They don't prohibit body parts. They prohibit human remains and fetal remains. They don't prohibit a whole range of things. In fact, they explicitly allow waste up to biosafety level 4, which is the most stringent level that exists, which is what you use in a lab that handles Ebola. And when there's a leak, well, look what happened at the Wuhan lab, if you believe that was the source. And that supposedly was a leak in an air handling unit. There are federal standards for how this waste is to be transported and handled. They're not in the DEEP permits. To me, it's clear DEEP hasn't done their homework on this, and they need to consult with DPH, and they need to consult with the federal government. And by not doing their due diligence here, they're putting our residents at risk, whether we're inhaling what's being emitted or our community through potential crashes and spills, of which Covanta has 7 a year in Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. Nice job. Will you share us your testing results that you had? Would you email those to us?
I will send you what I have.
Okay, thanks.
My name is Al Urso, 73 River Street, Southington.
Hi, Mr.
I come
Urso.
here often, but I never speak, but sometimes you just got to get it out there. I think the town did an excellent job in being quiet about when they negotiated with the fire department. Kudos to that. The union didn't do such a good job. And there are a lot of rumors out there of what's happened. I think we have to find out what happened during those arbitrations. The town deserves to know. The last contract, 2018 through 2021, the fire chief at the time said it was the easiest contract negotiations that he has ever been involved in, the 3 years of negotiations. What changed? What changed in 2024? Why did it take over 3 years to negotiate a contract? How much did it cost the town in legal fees? I read the minutes of the commissioners, fire commissioners, they're always moving money to legal fees, legal, 10,000, 12,000, 15,000. What's going on? What's the town's point of view? There's a lot of rumors out there. The union said they just wanted 2 men on a ladder truck. They don't even want to hire any more men. And it's only going to cost $266,000 in overtime. We've had an overtime problem in the fire department for over 10 years. The budget now is $600,000. They think the solution is to add another $250,000. 31 men and an $800,000 overtime budget. There's something wrong with that. Something is wrong. That's another issue. We have 31 men, and we only put 2 men on a ladder truck. Why? I know the answer, but the public doesn't know. And some of the neighbors will ask, why? How come we only have 2 men on the ladder truck? I don't know. We have 31 men. So I think that question should be answered. A few chiefs ago, that chief, who was asked to leave, stated that more men would require more overtime. The next chief comes aboard and says, if I hire 2 more men, I'll save you $200,000 in overtime. Well, that's a wash for taxpayers, and that's fine. You got 2 more men on the boat, 2 more men running. So with that logic, $800,000, why don't we hire 8 more firemen? There's an issue with the fire department. There has been for years. You looked and hired 2 groups to come in. The groups are retired IAFF employees. They're not going to tell you you have too many men. They're never going to tell you that. Maybe we should get together, get some common sense gentlemen, retired volunteers, retired career firefighters, and find a solution. $800,000, I don't know what the contract says. Some of the rumors I heard, the old town manager doesn't want to negotiate because he's not going to be here. The new town manager doesn't want to negotiate because he's new. A real good one that I think is funny, a Waterbury fireman told a neighbor that the fire department is asking for a housekeeper to make their beds and to cook their meals. I didn't argue that one. But we got to know what took 3 years and how much it cost. That we should be able to get the answer at the next meeting. Thank you so much for listening today.
Thank you, Mr. Urso. Anybody else?
Good evening. I am not a resident of Southington, so I know it's been a long evening for you. And so I just wanted to know if you kindly would entertain information that we would share for you. My name is Jody Morrow. I am a volunteer organizer with a group called Bristol Residents for Clean Air.
Ma'am, I'm sorry, what's your address?
Yes, I live in Bristol,
Yeah,
so
you're
I
not
don't.
allowed to speak during public communication,
Yes.
sorry.
So I'm asking if you
Yeah, but you're not allowed to speak during public
like
communications.
not even say my name.
You could talk to us after the meeting.
Okay, that
We'll be
that
around.
will do. Okay,
For sure,
thank you.
and we'll happy to
Okay.
talk to you.
Much understood.
Thank you. Okay. Any other resident of Southington that's willing to, that wants to speak tonight? Hopefully, we'll get through the meeting quick and we'll be able to touch base after. Okay. Anybody else for public communications before we close it? Regina, you good? All right. Public communications is closed. Let's move on to old business. Action item on the report of the Board of Finance.
Motion to approve is presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments on the report of Board of Finance? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes 8-0. We're looking for an action on the Southington Firefighters Union Contract IAFF, Local 2033.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve, and we have a second from Mr. Perry. It was you, Jack, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the contract? Okay, and I think the contract is a public contract, right? So that can be made available to the public if they request it.
The state arbitration award was made public July 5th. The contract is available. I can give
Yep,
to
if
anybody
anybody
who wants. It'll
inquires-
be on the town of Southington's Human Resources website after it's signed by the firefighters union.
Sounds good. So I think that will also address some of the questions about what the contract has inside of it. Okay, any other discussions about that topic? Union contract?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I know it took us a while to get here. I hope that the next time it doesn't take this long. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Anybody else? Yeah, and I think just adding on that, union contracts sometimes go smooth and sometimes they don't. And I don't think that when they don't go smooth, I don't think it's a reflection of the people. I think it's a reflection of, of the contract that's in front of them. Everybody's doing, I think they're putting their best foot forward to try to do what they think is right. So I think that's the case here. And as you said, Mr. Perry, hopefully, the next one, we can get it done without an arbitrator. And but if not, then that's what it takes. So we appreciate everybody's efforts throughout the entire process, and we're looking forward only. Any other questions on the contract? If not, we are looking to call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Del Santo,
Yes.
Dietzick,
Yes.
Morelli,
Yes.
Morrison,
Yes.
Palmieri,
Yes.
Perry,
Yes.
Clock,
Yes.
Chaplinsky.
Yes, thanks to all involved. Motion passes 8-0. Item D, action on CROG Hazard Mitigation and Climate Adaptation Plan Resolution.
You missed one, Mr. Chair.
Homeland Security.
You missed the Homeland Security grant.
Oh, I'm sorry. Item C, action on Homeland Security Grant Resolution. Sorry, guys. I
Motion
crossed
to-
that one off.
Motion to approve.
Mr. Palmieri, Mr. Del Santo. Any discussion on the Homeland Security Grant Resolution? Okay, why don't we call the roll, Madam Chair?
Del
Madam
San-
Clerk? That's $2.
Del Santo,
Yes.
Dietzick,
Yes.
Morelli,
Yes.
Morrison,
Yes.
Palmieri,
Yes.
Perry,
Yes.
Clock,
Yes.
Chaplinsky.
Yes. Item passes 8-0. Item D, action on CROG Hazard Mitigation and Climate Adaptation Plan Resolution.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Mr. Morelli and Mr. Del Santo, any comments on that? No discussion? Why don't you call the roll, Madam Clerk?
Del Santo,
Yes.
Dietzick,
Yes.
Morelli,
Yes.
Morrison,
Yes.
Palmieri,
Yes.
Perry,
Yes.
Clock,
Yes.
Chaplinsky.
Yes, the motion passes unanimously 8-0. Item E, action on Mount Southington Recreation Tax Abatement.
Motion to,
To approve.
Mr. Del Santo and
second.
Mr. Palmieri, any discussion on the Southington Recreation Tax Abatement? Hearing none, let's call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Del Santo,
Yes.
Dietzick,
Yes.
Morelli,
Yes.
Morrison,
Yes.
Palmieri,
Yes.
Perry,
Yes.
Clock,
Yes.
Chaplinsky.
Yes, motion passes 8-0. And the last item under old business, action on Hotel Tax Abatement 17 West. We're going to be looking for a motion for a public hearing.
Can schedule public hearing.
Motion for a,
Second.
hold on, we're looking for a motion to schedule a public hearing on
For the next
September
council
9th,
meeting, yes.
2024 at 7 PM.
So moved.
And we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the public hearing? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposition? None. Okay, motion passes 8-0. New business, tax refunds.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the tax refunds that are presented in our packets.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for Mr. Dietzick. Any discussion on the tax refunds? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 8-0. Appointments. We have 2 appointments on the Cable Advisory Council. We have Peter Kartz from 3 Parkview Drive is going to take over for Robert Tonin. And Tim Wilk at 144 Scenic Drive will take for Mr. James Hay. And those 2 are town council appointments, so we're looking for a motion for those 2.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chair.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the appointments of Mr. Kartz or Mr. Wilk to the Cable Advisory Committee? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 8-0. Ethics Board alternates. We have 2 that are currently serving. It's Mr. William Palmieri and Mr. Edward Malsick. And I believe we're going to reappoint both of those.
Please.
So we're looking for a motion to reappoint Mr. Palmieri and Mr. Malsick.
I'll make a motion.
Malchik.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on both of those. Any discussion on the 2? Just want to say 2 wonderful people, and Mr. Malchik is a former town councilman and chairman, so we thank him and the former deputy chief for serving on the ethics board as alternates. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously, 8-0. And I think we are looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Thanks, everybody. Great